out of all the survival horror games on the PS2, Siren is easily the one I hear about the least. While games like Haunting Ground and Rule of Rose may have cemented their places as mid-2000s horror cult classics, I would not say Siren has been so lucky, at least not in the West. It's a franchise infamous for its convoluted storytelling and brutally hard difficulty, a combination that is enough to scare away your average player, understandably so. But despite how inaccessible the Siren games are in many respects, I've always had a very strong attachment to this franchise, and well, considering Siren recently turned 20 years old, there's no better time to celebrate this underrated gem. Before Siren's initial release in 2003, the franchise creator worked at Konami for a number of years, where he created and directed the first Silent Hill in the late 90s. Siren is the brainchild of none other than the Silent Hill creator himself, Keiichiro Toyama. In 1999, 3 members of Team Silent, Toyama himself, Naoko Sato, and Isao Takahashi, left Konami to begin working at Sony's in-house development team, Japan Studio. It was during his time working here that Toyama realized that most of the games he'd worked on up until that point were very Western-orientated. Silent Hill, for example, takes place in Maine in the United States, and most of the inspiration for that franchise was drawn from primarily American media, things like Jacob's Ladder and novels written by Stephen King. Because of this, Toyama wanted to create something that was a little more close to home. He wanted his next IP to be a much more uniquely Japanese experience, one that resonated more with that audience instead. Especially since the late 90s and early 2000s saw an explosion in J-horror movies like Cure and The Ring, it's clear that there was a demand for a more Japanese take on horror. But what exactly is a more Japanese take on horror? What does that mean? Well, one staple would be its heavy focus on spirituality. While Western media tends to rely more on crazed serial killers, you might have noticed that ghosts, spirits, and haunted houses are the more typical go-to in Asian horror, and Japan, as well as many Asian countries, is rich with urban legends and mythology as a result, the perfect building blocks for creating horror. Many J-horror movies draw inspiration from these myths and legends, and Siren is absolutely no different in this regard, being heavily inspired by the legend of Sugisawa Village. This story spread like wildfire in Japan in the 90s when home internet was becoming more commonplace, and tells the tale of a villager who lost his mind one day and murdered everyone in the village in Aomori Prefecture. It eventually got nationwide coverage in the Japanese TV show Kiseki Taiken Unbelievable, which concluded that the haunted village of Sugisawa exists in the distortion of time and space, and is a village that appears and disappears. This idea of a cursed village that exists in some kind of distorted reality played a massive part in developing the village of Hanyuda, the set piece for the first Siren game. So then, what about the gameplay? Instead of just being another bog-standard horror game, Toyama specifically wanted to play with the idea of changing perspectives in Siren. Toyama said he went to an art exhibit one day with the game's scenario writer, Naoko Sato, where there was what he describes as a perception exchange system, where 2 people would put on goggles that were hooked up to a camera and monitor, which would allow them to see through the other person's point of view. In other words, you were hijacking the other person's sight. This became the basis for Siren's sight-jacking system, as he felt the idea of seeing someone else's perspective could be massively effective in a horror game. I mean, what better way to fuel fear in the player than letting them see through the eyes of the enemy? With these core ideas in mind, Siren underwent development with Toyama at the helm and released on the PlayStation 2 in late 2003 or early 2004 for us Westerners. So let's dive into the first game in this franchise to see how it holds up 20 years later. The game throws us right into the action and shows us Kyoya, our teenage protagonist, alone in a forest. He notices a girl trashing something in the distance, but she runs off as soon as she's noticed.
なんだあれ?
A few hours later, Kyoya sees a group of people performing some kind of ritual, but is quickly noticed by the group. He runs off into the forest and is followed by a crazed police officer. After a brief struggle, Kyoya ends up being shot in the chest and falls off the cliffside, only to wake up perfectly alive and well in a red river. Okay, so heads up, I am playing the Japanese version of Siren, because the localized version comes with an, in my opinion, absolutely insufferable English dub, to be honest, and I didn't want you to suffer through that, and I didn't want me to suffer through that, so you're welcome. I'm not normally a purist when it comes to dubs in games, but you will never convince me all of these Japanese villagers living in rural Japan have English accents, I'm sorry. Especially since the English dub has a tendency to mispronounce a lot of the Japanese words.
The Yumigiri.
Yumikuri, Yumigiri.
And the delivery has its moments.
Oh my god! She's coming!
I subtitled them all with the English dialogue, so don't worry, all that's changed are the voices. Getting the Japanese version of Siren also means I got the slick Japanese cover. I mean, hey, don't get me wrong, the European and American box art is cool too, but I don't know, the Japanese one just has this haunting, creepy energy to it that I love. It's giving Junji Ito vibes for sure. It's impossible to talk about the world of Siren without bringing up its very unique approach to visual design. If you've noticed that the characters all have photorealistic faces, it's because they literally do. The team at Japan Studio decided to take a very unconventional approach to its character design. Instead of creating 3D models of the characters like most games, they instead got the voice actors to dress up as the characters and took photos of them via 8 different angles, then imprinting these images onto the character model. This gives them a photorealistic appearance, something that would have been much harder to achieve with traditional 3D modelling. This was an incredibly advanced technique, making Siren quite a revolutionary title for the time it came out. It does have its moments of looking a little bit goofy, I gotta be honest, but I honestly adore this design choice, and visually speaking, Siren is one of my favourite games because of it. Not only does it allow the characters to convey emotions and expressions that might have been too difficult to achieve with early 2000s technology, but it looks so unsettling, so bizarre, maybe even bordering on Uncanny Valley, but that just makes it the perfect choice for a horror game, doesn't it? What better way to keep the player on their toes than to make even just a regular cutscene of 2 people talking look so unnervingly real? Not only that, while graphics can age, a photo of someone cannot. So in that sense, the visuals still look fantastic even by today's standards. On the status screen in the pause menu, you can even see headshots of the real actors, and it really helps these characters feel more like actual people as opposed to video game characters. This person wasn't just a voice actor, they dressed up as them and are the literal face of the character. The cutscenes all have this grain effect over them that makes them look very hazy and unclear. It feels like you're watching old, unearthed film reels rather than a game cutscene. Siren just has a really strong visual direction that has not only aged really well, but stands out so much compared to other games of its era. I could go on for days about how much I appreciate the incredibly unique visuals of Siren, but you'll be seeing plenty more of them as we go on, so let's talk a bit about the gameplay. After talking to the Red Nun, she says she'll lead you to safety, but first you have to make your way past a few more of the villagers who appear to have lost their mind. They're called a shibito, which means corpse or a dead person, but they're not quite zombies per se. They're violent and hunt you down relentlessly, but they still seem to retain some of their humanity and human intelligence. The cop shibito earlier on knew how to use a gun, for example, whereas others stick to using their farming equipment. When you're out of sight, they continue on with their daily routine, tending to crops or walking around the town. If you ever manage to fend one off using a weapon, they kneel down and cower on the ground, almost as if they're begging to be spared. Be that as it may though, you still don't quite know what's wrong with them, all you know is that it's probably best that you avoid them. And so at its core, Siren is a stealth-focused survival horror. While you can run in guns blazing in other games, Siren favours the more slow and strategic approach, crouching behind buildings, signs or furniture, waiting for a chance to run past. The less shibito you encounter, the better. That being said, this isn't a hard set rule. Across the 10 or so characters you play as in Siren's ensemble cast, some are more proficient with guns and weapons than others. 13-year-old Tomoko may have to rely on just stealth, but Tamon, by comparison, came prepared with his own handgun and clearly knows how to use it, able to shoot down Shibito in seconds and being quick on the reload. I really like this added layer of realism to Siren's cast. Instead of just a bunch of characters that all play and act the same, you have to factor in their age or even life experience into the equation. Akira, an elderly man who uses a hunting rifle, is slow on his feet because of his old age, and you have to consider this when climbing ledges or even reloading his gun. Compare this to Kyoya himself, who's only a teenager and so much more physically able while traversing the environments. This is something you'll have to remember while planning your route through an area. While you might be tempted to just rush past any danger with one character, you might want to think twice about doing it with another. It's a surprisingly deep system that was rare to see in survival horror back then. One thing that all the characters do share in common, however, is the sight-jacking mechanic, and possibly the most ambitious aspect of Siren's gameplay. Like I mentioned earlier, Toyama wanted an element to Siren's gameplay that would involve switching perspectives. Sightjacking is where we see this mechanic come into play. If you hit L2 on the controller and start to move the stick around almost like a tuning dial, you can hijack the sight of any Shibito nearby. This allows you to assess where they are in relation to you and, by extension, how you should go about avoiding them. Once you've found a Shibito, you can then assign it to one of the face buttons, meaning you can cycle between them with ease later on. So, as you're progressing through an area, you can keep an eye on the Shibito and their movements at all times, helping you plan the best way forward. And this mechanic is nothing short of genius. I've always been obsessed with the sightjacking idea. It's such a creative concept that is great in theory and works even better in execution. Cycling through the Shibito and hearing their staggered, heavy breathing as they stalk around the area just meters away from you is one of the most unnerving, anxiety-inducing things I've seen in a survival horror. Not only that, but you are completely vulnerable while sightjacking, and there is nothing scarier than seeing your own character through the enemy's eyes, just seconds away from being attacked. Because of this, you need to make sure to only use it when you know you're safely hidden. While looking through the enemy's eyes, your own location is indicated by this blue symbol here, and any companion or person accompanying you will show up as green. Yes, this game does have escort missions, and I know the very mention of those words makes some people lose their shit. They're not that bad. But in fairness, they're pretty tame here. You can tell them to follow you or stay put as needs be, and since the whole point of the game is to avoid Shibito entirely anyway, your companion is no more or less at risk of dying than you are. Plus, sometimes you can just tell the character to stay put, go do everything you need to do, and then come back and collect them later. That's usually a pretty valid strat as well. Between the Shibito, the anxiety-fueled sightjacking, and the absolutely haunting soundtrack, Siren really embraces its own unique flavour of horror, one that is tense, unsettling, but never too in-your-face about it. Things that are all very much defining characteristics of J-horror as a whole, really. The game's sound designer, Eriko Azuma, said they were specifically going for a minimalist sound that managed to convey the lonely, isolated nature of Hanyuda village as a whole, so much so that some of the tracks could almost be described as calming. The vocal tracks are definitely a standout though, in particular the throat singing. To me that's always been a staple of Siren's identity, and it turns out the developers were heavily inspired by Tuvan Mongol throat singing, the deeper sounding Kargara singing variety in particular, an influence that is very obvious when you play them side by side. Get used to hearing that music a lot though, because the puzzles and progression of Siren are no joke. People are not lying when they say this game is hard. It is absolutely brutal. You can die in only 1 or 2 gunshots, and while you are able to fight back against Shibito, if any more than 2 face you at once, you are screwed. This isn't like Resident Evil 4 where you can take on 20 Ganados without breaking a sweat. Any more than 3 hits and you're down for the count. Game over, start the level over from scratch. Not to mention the incredibly ambiguous puzzles. Usually the main objective of any given stage is pretty clear. Get from A to B or find a certain item in the area. But there are often hidden objectives and requirements needed to unlock other chapters that are not so clear. Things you wouldn't even consider doing, like, oh, if you walk through the shrub, there's a tiny little statue you gotta knock over. Also, you gotta do this with other characters in like 6 other stages. Alright, good luck. It's not helped by the fact the map doesn't give you your current position. You either remember roughly where you started and trace your steps from there, or look for the nearest landmark to figure out where you are currently, which can sometimes make exploration a bit disorientating, but I found a certain satisfaction in figuring out my current position for myself. One mission takes place in a small residential area, for example, and I kinda lost my way amongst all the housing, but I thought, hey, who lives in the house right next to me? Oh, okay, this is the Takaya household, so going by the map, that means the Kawasaki household is just over there. Okay, yeah, I know where I'm going now, got it. And I know I sound like a total zoomer right now, being amazed by the concepts of maps, but when most games give you like that little mini-map up in the corner, there's a certain thrill, I suppose, really, to doing it the old-fashioned way. The way levels themselves work is pretty unusual too. After you clear the first handful of missions, you gain access to the Link Navigator. It's basically an Excel sheet. Siren takes place over the course of 3 days, so you can look at a neatly organised timeline of each character and the date and time a mission takes place, and freely jump around that timeline at your own free will. This means that every mission is unlocked in a seemingly random order. Say a new mission for Akira opens up, which takes place at 8 AM on day 1. You do it, and then the one after could be at nighttime on day 2, a whole day later, meaning you've jumped ahead in the story quite a bit. The next mission after that could throw you back to day 1 again, with a totally different character. The progression, as well as the story overall, is told in a non-linear format, which can certainly be confusing on a first playthrough, I will say that. You really have to pay attention, or else you'll be totally lost. You know, explaining all of this now, it truly feels like the odds are stacked against you every step of the way as you play Siren, and I imagine my description has probably turned off a lot of people from ever wanting to try this, and I get that, I really do. But personally, all of these things that may be a turn-off for other people were exactly what made me love Siren. I liked the map not telling me where I was at all times because it's realistic. I like that you're not this indestructible machine and you can die pretty easily, because it's way more true to life. I like that some of the characters are more physically able and others are more slow-moving and cumbersome, because that's exactly how it'd be if this all happened in real life. I guess it comes down to whether or not you consider extremely realistic design in video games a good thing or a bad thing. Perhaps you could argue Siren strives to be too realistic in this regard, but personally, as someone who's been playing survival horror since I was a kid, and am largely desensitized to most games in the genre, Siren was a breath of fresh air. I finally felt a feeling of dread and anxiety again, something that Resident Evil and Silent Hill, after dozens of playthroughs each, haven't made me feel in years. It also just appeals to my personal tastes. Anyone who's watched my videos knows that stalker horror or horror games where you're largely defenseless are some of my favourite within the genre. It's probably the fact of, again, realism mixed with the fast decision making and strategizing that comes with it. But there's a lot of people who absolutely hate both of those things, and you know what, Siren probably ain't for you then, and that's okay. But when people critique Siren for being too hard or too obscure, something a lot of people fail to realise is that Siren is more than just a survival horror. It's a puzzle game. What's the first thing you do when you land in a stage? You sightjack to see where all the Shibito are, and then plan the most efficient, safest route past all of them. Strategizing and planning, that is a puzzle game. Every mission is a condensed puzzle that you have to figure out before you can progress, and not just that, but the story is as well. The way it's delivered to you is fragmented, and you're being given small snippets of the plot in random order at certain points in time over a 3-day period, and it's up to you to deduce what happened with the information you've been given. You're given all the pieces, but you have to connect the dots yourself. Something that may make no sense now might make way more sense later on when given more context. Both the story and gameplay of Siren are puzzles first and survival horror second, in my opinion. And once I started seeing it that way, I felt like I understood it more. When I saw a cutscene that seemingly made no sense, I thought, okay, I don't get it now, but this is only one piece of the puzzle, it'll make more sense later. And it most certainly is one of those plots. It's a story that all falls into place once you've made it to the very end, and with that, I think we ought to talk about the story now, so yeah, that's your spoiler warning. We're going to talk pretty in-depth about Siren 1's plot, so do skip ahead if you don't want to hear any of it. Like I said earlier, Siren has an ensemble cast of give or take 10 characters, and the game follows all of their stories pretty equally. It's kind of hard to discuss all of them at once, so before we do, let's first talk about what is actually going on in Hanyuda in the first place. All the way back in the year 684 AD, a god called Dadatsushi fell from the heavens and landed near the village of Hanyuda. It was around this time that Hanyuda was going through a terrible famine, and out of desperation, the villagers ate the god to stay alive. Dadatsushi let out a sharp cry, cursing one of the villagers to immortality and killing the rest. That surviving villager was Hisako, the Red Nun. Over the centuries, Hisako created the Mana religion, a belief system that blends elements of Japan's native Shintoism with Christianity, with the aim of reviving Dadatsushi and hopefully freeing the village of its curse. The siren we hear throughout the story then isn't a siren per se, it's the cry of Dadatsushi, calling forth the villagers to become Shibito and prepare for its rebirth. The red water we see throughout the game is, at least symbolically speaking, the spilled blood of Dadatsushi. And so every time the siren goes off, the Shibito walk towards the Red Sea in a ritual called Umi Okuri, meaning sending to the sea, which is then followed by the Umi Gaeri, or return from the sea. Every time this happens, the Shibito become less and less human, tears of blood streaming from their eyes as it's slowly replaced by the red water. They gradually take on a more insect-like form, growing wings and crawling on the ground, taking on the form of Dadatsushi and losing their humanity. Even the names of Dadatsushi and Hanyuda are references to this history. Dadatsushi literally means fallen dragon, whereas the kanji for the village as a whole reads as Hanyuda Mura, literally meaning winged snake village. This means that, at least for Japanese speakers, Dadatsushi and Hanyuda's names already hint at what's to come in the story. So, a couple of failed revival ceremonies later, and we come to 2003, the year that Siren 1 takes place. After narrowly escaping the cop Shibito, Kyoya encounters Miyako, a blind girl. Before long, they're approached by Miyako's older brother, but in a moment of panic she knocks him out and quickly runs off with Kyoya, where they find refuge in an abandoned house. Miyako is part of the Kajiro family, distant descendants of Hisako who've lived in the village for centuries. Every so often, a Kajiro is born with the natural ability to sightjack, as well as immunity from becoming a Shibito. Those born with this ability are the ones destined to be sacrificed in order to revive Dadatsushi. This is the ritual that Kyoya interrupted at the very beginning of the game, inadvertently saving Miyako from death. As thanks, Miyako gives Kyoya some of her blood while he's sleeping, promising him that she won't let him become one of the Shibito. Unfortunately though, Kyoya and Miyako's time together is short-lived. Her brother manages to capture her and brings her to the newly built Shibito nest, where they plan to attempt the ritual once more.
さあ、楽園の門が開かれる。もう実はこれで揃ったの。次の実はもういらない。楽園をもたらす神の復活を祝福しましょう。これで罪は洗い流された。
遅かったか。
先生。
Miyako.
However, his arrival is cut short by an unexpected flood of red water, destroying the Shibito nest entirely. The god retreats to its own dimension to recover from its wounds, but Kyoya follows after and manages to decapitate it, taking revenge for Miyako's death and, by extension, ending the curse on Hanyuda village. Sadly, this isn't the triumphant ending it seems. While Miyako's blood has saved Kyoya from becoming a Shibito, he still had a lot of exposure to the red water, and so cannot return to the real world. After killing off all of the remaining Shibito in Miyako's honour, Kyoya is then doomed to wander a desolate Hanyuda forever. Yikes. Pretty bleak. While it might seem like that's where the story ends, well, technically it never ends, at least for Hisako. When Kyoya kills the god, Hisako's curse of immortality was also lifted, and in her last moments she holds onto the decapitated head of Dadatsushi, falling into a sort of dimensional rift. It's easy to think nothing more of this moment, but those who are paying close attention might remember a cutscene earlier on where Hisako is standing at a beach and sees an elderly version of herself out at sea. When you see this cutscene first, it makes absolutely no sense, but the ending helps us put together the pieces. Simply put, Hisako is doomed to endlessly relive the events of the game forever. The elderly Hisako visits her younger self at the beach and gives her the head of Dadatsushi, reminding her of what she must do. After Dadatsushi is slain by the end of the game, the curse is lifted and she falls into a dimensional rift, landing her on the beach and meeting her younger self once again. Rinse and repeat. While everyone else either turned into a Shibito or is destined to wander the underworld forever, Hisako must relive the cycle of going back in time and seeing Dadatsushi's revival over and over again forever. She'll never be able to truly lift her curse of eternal life, and part of me thinks that is the worst fate of them all. But most importantly, who survives? Kyoya, of course, but not exactly in the way we want him to. Tamon, a folklore professor who lost his family in Hanyuda when he was a child, sees visions of his parents before he's saved by Yoriko, his student. Was he transforming into a Shibito and that's what was causing the visions, or was he just losing his mind? That is left up to the player. The only person who makes it out truly unscathed is Harumi, who had very little exposure to the red water to begin with. The final cutscene ominously ends with her crying while she walks out of Hanyuda, the only survivor of the entire incident. You know, bar all of the trauma and lifetime of nightmares ahead of her. And that serves as the core plot of Siren, but remember that Kyoya, Miyako, and Hisako are just few out of a very big cast of characters, and while I would consider them to be the closest we have to protagonists in Siren, what makes the story go from good to great are the rest of the characters. The joy of having such a diverse cast is you can tackle multiple stories utilizing the same setting. Sure, being the hero and saving the day is cool and all, but what about a regular villager of Hanyuda? How did they get on? Or what about a television crew who happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time? Allowing the player to bob and weave into different subplots in a non-linear way just like Siren did means it's able to take on all of those narratives at once. Now, in fairness, some character stories are comparatively short-lived, some lasting only 2 or 3 missions before being killed off. Akira ends his life only to find that you can't escape becoming a Shibito even in death. Reiko sacrifices herself to save her student Harumi from being killed. But probably the most fascinating, albeit terrifying character out of all of them was, in my opinion, Shiro, the doctor. Shiro was born as one of 2 twins who were separated at birth and raised in different families. While Shiro became a doctor, his brother Kei became a local priest in Hanyuda. Obviously, being raised in different families but growing up in the same village has left a strained relationship between the two. While Kei is the softer and more empathetic one, Shiro is far more cold and distant, and every conversation we see between the two comes across as very awkward and overall lacking in any friendliness you might expect from 2 siblings. Shortly after the first siren, Shiro regains consciousness in front of what looks like a grave. While he tries to find his way to safety, a girl called Risa bumps into him, saying she's come to the village looking for her sister Mina. We learn that Mina is actually Shiro's girlfriend, and he seems thoroughly unfazed by the fact she's missing, but the two decide to go to the hospital since that's the most likely place she'd be. Mina is there, but has long since become a Shibito, and not too long after, Risa as well.
Sensei.
Minaか。いや。やっぱり双子だな。死に顔までよく似ているよ。やめろ。払うな。やめろ。
Shiro was the one who murdered Mina, and the grave that we saw at the beginning of his story was one he dug up himself to hide her body. But thanks to the siren's call, Mina reanimated as a Shibito and dug herself out of her own grave. We never find out why exactly Shiro murdered her, but the game seems to heavily imply that it was due to Mina becoming unexpectedly pregnant and Shiro then killing her out of frustration. This is hinted at by the fact that, at least in the Japanese version of the game, the newly Shibito'd Risa and Mina sing the melody of the Japanese nursery rhyme Kagome Kagome. With both sisters now lost, Shiro's story feels like it comes to a standstill. That is until much later on, when his brother Kei goes looking for him in the basement of the hospital, leading to what is easily one of the most unsettling moments in the series.
これは。待ってましたよ。永遠の命の種明かしですよ。どんなに切り刻んでも自己再生しちまう。これじゃあ俺も用なしだ。 狂ってる。
While he claims to do it in the name of science and discovering if there's a way to kill off Shibido for good, it doesn't change how incredibly disturbing his actions are. And yet there's nothing that can be done. Hanyuda is in disarray. Everyone has either already turned into a Shibido or has focused their efforts on hunting down Miyako. So, in that sense, Shido has won. He managed to avoid any accountability for his actions, and no one will ever know that he was a murderer. He uses this to his advantage later on again when he kills his own brother Kei, partially out of revenge for feeling overshadowed by him his entire life, and partially so he can take his uniform and see Dadatsushi's birth for himself. But somewhere along the way, he seems to get a change of heart. He decides to destroy the dam further upstream, meaning he was the one who caused the Redwater flood that ultimately led to Dadatsushi's demise. Shido's story ends when he uses a religious statue called the Urien to free the souls of the failed Shibido, ambling monsters that have been rejected by Dadatsushi, ultimately taking his own life in the process. As he dies, he sees a vision of Mina and Risa welcoming him on to the afterlife. It's rare that we see a character as morally grey as Shido in a game. He might have saved dozens of souls by the end, but it doesn't change the fact of what he did to Risa, Mina, and his own brother. It leaves us, the player, with the question, does Shido's one good action absolve him of his past actions? That's up to you, I suppose. You can decide for yourself if his death was either well-deserved or tragic, and this is something that Siren does wonderfully. Very rarely does it present its characters or what happens to them as good or bad. It simply presents the facts, and that can often lead to some very bittersweet storytelling. Naoko and Tomoko are more examples of this. Naoko is a washed-up actress who laments the fact she's no longer in her prime and struggles to find more acting gigs. When she discovers that drinking the red water will grant her immortality and therefore eternal youth, she completely submerges herself in the water and willingly accepts the risk of becoming a Shibido. Tomoko, on the other hand, ran away from home after an argument with her parents. She meets the priest Kei, and the two of them try to find a way to safety before they're split up by a rifle-wielding Shibido. She meets Hisako, who promises to bring her safely back to her parents, but in actuality ends up abandoning her and leaving her to her death. This leads to what is, to me, the most memorable part of Siren 1. We play as Tomoko again after this, who unexpectedly seems perfectly alive and well, but she suddenly begins to see visions of angels, the world around her tinted with a golden heavenly hue.
Tenshi-sama?
Notice that the newly Shibitoed Naoko didn't attack Tomoko whatsoever. As we make our way to the church, none of the other Shibido attack us either. Along the way, we meet Naoko again, who keeps begging us to look at her eternal beauty, the last few remnants of her human personality shining through, even as a Shibido.
私を見てよ。お願いね。
This is what it's like for someone who is slowly becoming a Shibido. We are seeing the world through the eyes of someone who's in the last stages of transformation. When she finally makes it to the church, her parents are horrified to see their daughter now a monster, and Tomoko has no choice but to leave them in peace, accepting that soon she will lose any remaining semblance of humanity. Much later on, when we play as Harumi, we see Tomoko with her parents, finally reunited, though unfortunately all of them a Shibido. What particularly got to me about Tomoko's story, aside from the fact not even an innocent child can escape becoming a Shibido, was the fact she might have survived had she not encountered Hisako. She placed her trust in her, and this is exactly what led to her demise, and sure, there's no guarantee she would have survived either way, but maybe things would have worked out better if Hisako never found her. It's sad to think that Tomoko might have survived if her and Kei hadn't been split up. As for Naoko, we last see her in the nest, her face now hideously disfigured, a bitterly ironic end for someone who wanted eternal youth and beauty. I could talk for days about the story and lore of Siren. It feels like a much more fleshed out and fully realised concept from Toyama's previous work in Silent Hill, and there's so much to discuss and dissect that frankly I could have made an entire video solely talking about Siren 1. Maybe I will still do that. Did Tamon and Yoriko survive, or did they just end up becoming Shibido? Did Kyoya ever end up making it out of Hanyuda, or is he really stuck there forever? People speculate that Shido murdered Mina because of her pregnancy, but we never got a definitive answer about that. He could also just be a murderous asshole. The way the story is presented to you is left with plenty of room for speculation, and I love that because it means everyone can come out of it with a new and interesting take on what they just saw. The puzzles, as obscure as they can be, also have some great world-building moments as well. A standout example is Ishida, the cop Shibito. If you read this archived newspaper, you learn that Ishida seemed to have an alcohol addiction, having won a sake tasting contest in the town. This addiction is also how he became the first person to transform into a Shibito. Alcohol thins your blood, after all, and so the red water entered his body and took effect quicker. Later on, he's turned into a fly Shibito, and in an effort to distract him, you must pour some sake into a puddle on the ground, luring Ishida over and keeping him distracted. That newspaper is one of 100 archive items to collect in Siren, from letters to books to drawings, and every one of them adds a little bit more to the characters and overarching narrative. Every one of them gives you some more food for thought, like the fact Miyako's name isn't even on her family register so that they can cover up her death, or even Yoriko's classroom doodles of Tamon. Kyoya Student ID even has a link to a real-world website called occultland.com, and granted it's not accessible anymore thanks to being a 20-year-old website, it showed Kyoya on an occult forum discussing a creepy ghost village with other users in late July, mere days before the events of the game. Shout out to the Naoko ad at the top of the page as well, it's a good touch. There is just a frightening level of effort to craft a very real, very believable narrative both in the story itself and in the archives. It makes for such a rich storytelling experience, and like I said, I could talk for days about it. The combat is old school survival horror levels of clunky, yes, no more or less than other games were at the time. In the vast majority of the levels, you have a weapon so you can always defend yourself in a pinch. The rest just comes down to exploring the area thoroughly and experimenting with what you've been given. Plus, assuming you're playing on original hardware, the OG manual actually comes with a dedicated hint section for every chapter. Being cruel and unforgiving, and by extension depicting the terrifying, desperate situation these characters are in, was part of Siren's design from the very start. The tagline for Siren's marketing in Japan was "Do agaite mo zetsubo," which translates roughly as "No matter how much you try, there is no hope." Adversity and despair was always an intentional part of Siren's identity, which, yes, means it was probably going to be niche from the very start, but I'm sure the developers were very aware of that risk, and I honestly respect that they stayed true to their intentions despite that. Besides, there's no shame in just using a walkthrough for this game, especially nowadays, 20 years down the line. The aim with Siren was for players to work together online through forums and the like to solve puzzles together. Think like PT before PT was even a thing. In Siren Maniacs, a series of guidebooks that were released alongside the games, which included interviews, concept art, and so on, Toyama shed some light on this, saying he was heavily influenced by the 1984 Namco arcade game The Tower of Druaga. The first game's difficulty was something I planned all along. It was exactly what I was aiming for, something that you can't beat if you just play it as normal by yourself. I wanted that to lead to sharing of info online or by word of mouth, complementing each other. Like I've said before, what I had in mind was something like the old arcade game The Tower of Druaga. Internet message boards didn't exist back then, but the information needed to get through the game was disseminated via notes left at game centers or word of mouth. I wanted to see if I could get everyone to experience the fun of getting together to solve the game. That ended up with the difficulty being intentionally cranked up. He later admits that they likely amped up the difficulty of Siren a little bit too much. They plan to address this in Siren Special Edition, a planned re-release of the game that would include behind-the-scenes extras, a more detailed hint system, and even difficulty options, but sadly this never came to fruition and ended up being cancelled. Though, even to this day, Toyama still has faith in Siren's challenging design, because in a much more recent interview released in August 2023 on the Den Faminico Gamer website, he said that Siren's difficulty made sense given its themes and story, stating, "Well, I think it matched the story and setting of Siren. The ending feels like a light at the end of the tunnel in an otherwise hopeless world." Later adding, "That being said, our aim with Siren was fully realised once Let's Plays and gaming commentary became a thing. The Let's Player acted almost like a curator, and once we had that presence added to the mix, it finally conveyed the sense of fun that I think many people didn't get to experience." But of course, this aspect of Siren hasn't aged very well. Having the internet discuss how to beat the game together would have worked great in 2003, but unfortunately now, a new player with no knowledge of Siren and its obscure gameplay would just think it's a needlessly cruel and unforgiving experience, so my advice? Just use a walkthrough. Save yourself the hassle, save yourself the headache. If you want to experience Siren without the ambiguity and frustration, keep a walkthrough handy. I can't deny it'll probably kill some sense of accomplishment and the whole fending for yourself element to the gameplay, but for many people that is a worthy trade-off. It's interesting comparing Toyama's previous work in Silent Hill to Siren, and how much he grew as a director in such a short time. You can definitely see parallels between the two. The siren sound, of course, and the whole idea of a cursed village cut off from the rest of the world for one, obviously, but also narratively. Miyako resembles Alessa in a lot of ways, in that they're both young girls abused by an oppressive cult. Shido reminds me a lot of Kaufman, both being cold-hearted, narcissistic doctors, and much like Kaufman manipulated Lisa, so too did Shido manipulate Mina. Probably the coolest similarity for me was at the very end of Siren, when we see Hadami being relentlessly pursued by a Shibito. Reiko, Hadami's teacher who had already unfortunately turned into a Shibito much earlier on, suddenly appears and drags Hadami's pursuer off the crumbling structure, both of them plummeting to their deaths, showing us that even in her undead state there was still some awareness, some humanity in her deep down, going so far as to sacrifice herself one final time for Hadami's safety. In Silent Hill 1, Lisa does the exact same thing. Despite having turned into a monster in front of her own eyes earlier on, she still musters up her last bit of strength to stop Kaufman from escaping and pulls him down, presumably to hell. And you know what? I think Siren does it better. I do. I think when it comes to horror and originality, Siren 1 is a much better horror game than Silent Hill 1. Controversial. I know that might be blasphemous to say for some people, and I get it, but the thing is, a lot of people, when they compare the two franchises, they forget that Toyama only worked on the first Silent Hill. He had nothing to do with Silent Hill 2 and beyond, and so exclusively looking at Silent Hill 1 and Siren 1, Siren did it better. I mean, you guys know me, I'm a massive Silent Hill fan, always have been, always will be. I love the first game to death, but I'm not blind to its faults either. The storytelling could have been a little bit tighter, and the area progression can be agonizing at points. Siren just has a stronger vision, it has a more fully realized story and execution. I feel like I can see Toyama's improvements as a director in the 4 years between the two games. This is something that Toyama has even acknowledged himself, having said in the same Den Feminico Gamer interview that with Silent Hill, I was entrusted with directing a major title at a very young age. Although it was a very valuable experience, there were definitely things I could have done better. Later adding, thankfully, Silent Hill was received very well, and while it was a new approach to horror, it was still very heavily influenced by Resident Evil. So with Siren, I wanted to create something that had never been done before, something unique, rather than build on titles that already existed. Naoko Sato had similar gripes about Silent Hill 1, where she worked as the monster designer. In her words, fear is an emotion that sits between normality and abnormality, but Silent Hill, being set in an American town, was made by a dev team of entirely Japanese people. Because of this, Sato always had her doubts about whether or not it accurately portrayed a normal American setting, and feels that lack of realism may have held it back. Much like Toyama, this is something she wanted to address in Siren by creating a story set in Japan. After all, the normality she'd know best is that of her own native country. And, you know, I see where they're coming from with this. Sure, an artist is always going to be their own worst critic, but who am I to tell them they're wrong? And so I'm not saying that Silent Hill 1 is bad, obviously, put down the pitchforks. It's still a masterclass of horror in my eyes, but Siren feels more, I guess, complete. Like I said, a more fully realized vision. So, final thoughts? If I haven't made it obvious enough, I love Siren 1 dearly. It has amazing artistic direction, particularly the photorealistic visuals that are as creepy as they are enchanting. A fantastic Japanese folk horror story that just keeps getting better the more you read archives and immerse yourself in its world. A desolate, haunting soundtrack that sticks with you, though for your average player, this will all be held back by its unforgiving progression, as Siren boasts a gameplay style that quite literally makes you fend for yourself in every sense of the word. If you're obsessed with survival horror like me, you might welcome this challenge with open arms. Everyone else, just use the walkthrough. It's worth it either way to experience one of the most fascinating, most absurd and upsetting survival horror titles we ever got. Siren doesn't feel the need to be held back by traditional storytelling standards or appealing to the widest audience. It knows that its style is niche and it embraces it. That just makes me respect it all the more. There's no better example of this than in one of the final cutscenes in the game, when Kyoya decides to take down the last remaining Shibito while blaring Japanese metal. At first this cutscene really took me off guard, but the more I simmered on it, the more I love how unexpected it is. You can never really tell what was going to come next in Siren. It's weird, it's unorthodox, and if you're unfamiliar with J-horror, it's probably unlike anything you've ever played before. And so yeah, that's Siren 1. I could dissect more and more about it, but then this video would go on for like 10 hours, so let's move along to Siren 2, the next chapter in the Siren franchise. Now, I think I've made it pretty clear that I loved Siren 1, but clearly the entirety of America did not agree. Due to weak sales and middling reviews in the States, Siren 2 only released in Japan and Europe in 2006 on the PS2, and never saw an American release whatsoever. Oops, awkward. Anyway, the Japanese box art once again goes insanely hard, this time with a girl walking along railway tracks and a little boy following along behind her. I don't know what it is, but I find this cover art even more haunting than the first one. It's probably just the pitch black void in the back there, but yeah, creepy stuff. I like it a lot. The European cover art is pretty creepy too, don't get me wrong, but I'll always be drawn to a pretty illustration quicker, I think. Now, if you didn't bother playing Siren 1 and were just planning on jumping straight into the sequel, then you have nothing to fear. Siren 2 follows an entirely new cast of characters, this time taking place on Yamijima Island. There are very minimal ties to the events of the first game. We do see Harumi being saved by a rescue team after she made it out of Haneda, but otherwise you can go into this with no knowledge of Siren 1 and you'll follow along just fine. Now, one major improvement already about this game is that it actually has Japanese voice acting available in the localized version. Thank God. With such a distinctly Japanese setting, I just think Japanese voices make the most sense, so yeah, switching that shit on anyway. Though it does have English voice acting again this time around, and it's interesting. Instead of English accents like in Siren 1, this time they sound more like Japanese people speaking English with a really heavy accent. But then sometimes it slips back into that English accent, so I don't know if they're really Japanese. Are they just English people speaking with a faux Japanese accent? It's very inconsistent and very distracting, to be honest.
It's too weird. I just can't explain it all. Don't you think so too? Everything that's happening around us.
Yeah, the more I listen to this, the more I kinda hate it. I just don't get what the goal was here. How about you just let people speak their native language? Are monolinguals that scared of subtitles? Jesus Christ. I'm like 90% sure that they're not Japanese people though, because they even fumble pronouncing actual Japanese words as well. Especially since the accents slip back into English every now and then.
It'll be okay. I'm telling you. I'll look after you. Okay?
And this was also the mid-2000s. I'd fully believed if they just grabbed a bunch of people off the street and said, hey, do these lines for us and just sound Japanese. Alright, here's your paycheck. It won't be the first time that's happened either. Remember Mei Ling from Metal Gear Solid? She's American born and so is her voice actress, but in the first game she has this super heavy Chinese accent that just disappears in later games.
Nice to meet you, Snake. It's an honor to speak to a living legend like yourself.
It'll take me a while to get there, but I'll be backing you up from aboard the Missouri. She's the only ship in the fleet still able to move.
This is the exact same voice actress, by the way. They clearly asked her to ham up the accent in the original, which is a questionable decision, to say the least. A decision that the producers later admitted was a mistake in hindsight. All I'm saying is this over-exaggeration of accents was pretty common in most media back then, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened in Siren 2 as well. I'd love to be proven wrong, but the voice actors listed in the credits are just the Japanese actors, not the English ones, so I guess we'll never know. It also has moments where the dub doesn't even match the subtitles, which is really bad, to be honest, so yeah, let's just stick to the Japanese again this time, yeah? The game starts us off in the year 1976 with a scene of a father and son saying goodnight to each other, but after the son is left to sleep, he hears a struggle outside his door. We very briefly control the boy in a first-person segment, and going downstairs, we find his father brutally murdered. Oof, that is a ballsy opening cutscene. What a way to grab the player's attention. It soon fades to black and we're now in modern day, that is 2005. We're shown a group of people on a ship heading towards Yamijima Island. Before long, a massive red tidal wave capsizes the boat and all those on board are separated once they make it ashore. Taking control of Mamoru, who much like Kyoya is the closest we have to a main protagonist, he decides to explore the island to look for help and find any fellow survivors. And straight away, once I gained control of Mamoru, the first thing I checked out when I could was the walking speed while crouching. And I know that seems very specific, but but in Siren 1, it was awfully slow, and you know, I just got used to it after a while, but I wanted to see if this was something they addressed in Siren 2, and thankfully, they did. The characters in Siren 2 move a lot quicker here, and this is just one of many gameplay elements that have been improved tenfold in the sequel, so kudos to the developers for taking those criticisms on board. We make our way into what looks like a housing area and meet a girl called Yuri, and the two decide to press on together before turn right? Yeah, sure, alright. So we decide to then move... right, yeah, no, I think I could figure that much out myself, yeah, alright. So, yeah, no shit, man, where the hell else am I meant to go? Yeah, so we move on anyway, and after we climb up... Yeah, so the game kind of pissed me off in the first few minutes because, dear god, they clearly got a few complaints about the lack of tutorials in Siren 1, but this is overkill, man. For the first few minutes, you're kind of just stopping and starting constantly as the tutorial tells you, go here, climb the ladder, turn around. It's way too much. I appreciate that they explain things a bit more, it's only fair on the player after all, but this kind of tutorial is really intrusive and just makes you kind of feel like an idiot. But at least they're short-lived. After this first stage, you're not really bothered by tutorials much anymore, and on the topic of gameplay mechanics, what's new this time around in Siren 2? Like I said a few minutes ago, crouching, sneaking around, and just generally stealth, you know, the whole point of these games, is way easier this time around. The movement feels a lot snappier and faster, which is a welcome change after the fairly sluggish movement of some characters in Siren 1. The map now actually shows you your current location, finally, and yeah, I know I was saying that I liked that Siren 1's map didn't do that, but, you know, I'd be lying if I said I didn't appreciate the convenience of it in 2. Both are good in different ways. 1's was more realistic and forced you to figure things out for yourself, whereas 2 is just more accessible from a gameplay perspective. You can even hop around to different floors and it shows you where you entered and where your destination is, so it couldn't be more user-friendly than that. And what about sightjacking? Is there anything new there? It operates mostly the same as the first game. Use the left stick as a tuning dial to find a Shibito, assign it to a face button, and away you go. But there's been one tiny addition that makes a world of a difference. By just hitting the L1 button, you will instantly jump to the POV of the nearest Shibito, wherever they may be. This is super handy because sometimes you might just hit L1 out of curiosity and you realize, oh god, there's a Shibito just over there, oh shit. Because it snaps to the nearest Shibito, and therefore the most likely immediate threat, it can really come in clutch sometimes. There were times in the first game you could be running along thinking all is well, but oh shit, there's a Shibito just over there, I didn't even see him, ah damn it, and then you run away and try to lose him, which would usually result in running into more Shibito, and yada yada yada. Now, if you ever want to play it safe, just hit the L1 button and see if there's a Shibito nearby. Though, truth be told, it's kinda hard to miss a Shibito to be honest, because when you get really close to one, you hear this obnoxiously loud sound effect warning you. So of all the things that Siren 2 improves over the first game, this isn't one of them. To me at all. I honestly think it's really obnoxious. I just find the sound effect is like unnatural and a bit distracting, to be honest. And I know this sounds really nitpicky, and it probably is, but it's kind of hard to not notice it, you know? I preferred that in Siren 1 there was nothing like this, so you had to be really cautious and survey an area thoroughly by sightjacking before running out in the open. Act too hastily and you'd probably be spotted. This warning sound is a more forgiving system overall, which again is a welcome change of pace. I personally just don't like that now the game has to scream at you saying, "Watch out, there's a Shibito over there, watch out!" Now granted, it's only for really close by enemies, it's not like it makes sightjacking redundant or anything, you still very much need to rely on that for far away enemies, snipers and the like. I guess there's just a certain lack of subtlety to it, it just doesn't really sit well with me. But on the plus side, there are some really creative uses of sightjacking this time around. You can tell that they established the concept in Siren 1, but they ran even further with it in Siren 2. For example, the character Shu is blind, so he has to rely on sightjacking his dog's vision to navigate. This means exploring entire areas and avoiding enemies through someone else's eyes. And this is used really effectively, because naturally trying to direct yourself through someone else's point of view would be a little bit disorientating, right? It feels like they managed to replicate the feeling of fumbling around in the dark through a game mechanic, and I really like it. It's a fantastic development of the sightjacking concept. Especially at the end of one of Shu's stages where you get attacked and you don't have the chance to sightjack, so you just gotta run away as quickly as possible without getting caught, only using Shu's super blurry vision. It was the classic formula of getting us comfortable with something only to tear it away from us when we need it most, and it worked like a charm. You can even see a bit of panic in my movement here, it was really well done. There's also Akiko, who was born with psychic abilities and can see visions of the past when she sightjacks, and Ikuko even has the ability to straight up mind control Shibito too, which leads to some very inventive puzzles. But here's the sad thing about all of these ideas, they are all so heavily underutilized. They introduce most of them early on, use them like once or twice, and then never again for the rest of the game. It's a damn shame. I was particularly interested in seeing more of Shu and the dog sightjacking. I mean, think of all the varieties of puzzles and setups you could use with that idea, but no, you only do it like twice ever. Then on the flip side, there are dozens of stages where you run around the place mowing down Shibito like crazy with a gun. There's a much bigger variety of weapons in Siren 2, either lying around the place or ones you can nab from a downed Shibito, and you will certainly need them because you will be facing enemies head on way more this time. There's a way bigger focus on combat, and this took me really off guard at first. After the super stealth focused gameplay of Siren 1, which challenging as it may be, I enjoyed it a lot, going into a game where I was like a one-man army killing dozens of Shibito per stage was not something I was very fond of at first, to be honest. You'll mainly be doing that in stages where you play as Yorito and Misawa, both of whom are literal soldiers, so I guess it kind of makes sense for them to be kitted out with guns and all that, but man, I just found them to be my least favourite stages, personally. Not at all because they're poorly made, let me make that clear. They play exceptionally well, actually. The shooting is fast and responsive. You can move and shoot at the same time, which, believe it or not, was a rarity in survival horror in the 2000s, and if you run out of ammo, you can pick up weapons dropped by the enemies to stay protected. In fact, the combat-heavy stages in Siren 2 are really impressive for the year it came out. It feels more like an early PS3 game with how fluid it all is. Especially so when you realise that Resident Evil 4, the game that is often credited with revolutionising third-person shooter gameplay, came out only a year before Siren 2. Realistically, both were in development at the exact same time, and between the two, Siren 2's combat has aged way better. It isn't tank controlled, it's less rigid, and you can move while aiming. It's better in every way, and that is really impressive. In that sense, I think Siren 2 deserves a lot more credit in how it modernized over-the-shoulder combat in games. It's never mentioned when people talk about that stuff, which is crazy to me, seeing how well it's aged for an almost 20-year-old game. There's a lot more enemy variety this time around too, because not only are there Shibito, but also the brand new Yamibito and Yamide enemies, literally meaning darkness people and dark spirits respectively. They're susceptible to your flashlight, which you can use to ward them off, but they're just as aggressive as Shibito are, if not even more so. They also tend to run around in packs, I noticed, well, at least the Yamide do, whereas Shibito mostly operate individually from each other. The Yamibito and Yamide only start cropping up a few hours into Siren 2, and they do offer a bit of variety to the stages. I generally found that I would lean more towards stealth when I was up against Shibito, and I was more prone to head-on combat against the Yami enemies. But this isn't where my issue lies. In fact, I have nothing but praise for Siren 2 on a technical level. It's more to do with how this all impacts the atmosphere of the game. Siren 2's atmosphere is very different to Siren 1. Some stages are good old stealth, and some are more combat heavy. This means that Siren 2 is a much more varied experience over its predecessor. If you found that the stealth element to Siren 1 stagnated after a while, you probably won't feel that this time around. And sure, it was pretty therapeutic sometimes being able to gun down a bunch of monsters. But I can't help but feel that it made the enemies far less threatening overall. In Siren 1, you really only got to use guns whenever you played as Tamon and Akira, but even then, it's not like they were trained soldiers or anything. Everyone else either relied on a weapon they found lying around, or just completely avoided combat entirely. This means that the Shibito in Siren 1 felt like a much greater force to be reckoned with. If I was ever seen, the panic set in instantly. I'd feel my heart rate go up a little bit, because those guys are persistent, and even just one Shibito will be enough to kill you. And so, booting up Siren 2, where within the first hour of gameplay I was wiping out hordes of them in a matter of minutes wielding an AK-47, I couldn't help but feel that the Shibito were far less intimidating now. I mean, why would I be scared of them? I might have to sneak around them as one character, but it's alright. Once I'm playing as Yorito again, I'll be mowing them down like it's nobody's business. Now, having said all of this, I know this is just my opinion. You might be watching this thinking, yeah, I'm not seeing the problem here, and that's great. You're gonna have a great time with Siren 2, much like I did. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy the game, just I didn't feel the fear factor nearly as much this time. The tensions, as well as the sense of helplessness and despair, were not nearly as present with me with Siren 2 as it was for Siren 1, and that's fine. I know I'm probably an outlier saying this, I just can't deny it made Siren 2 a less impactful experience. But enough of that, what about the story this time around? What exactly is going on at Yamijima Island? Let's discuss the plot a little bit more, so spoiler warning, blah blah blah. Much like in Siren 1, there's another god that is central to the story, two gods actually, Mother and Otoshigo. These deities existed millennia ago before the events of the game, but were imprisoned below the earth upon the creation of light. Mother dwelled below Yamijima, whereas Otoshigo dwelled beneath the sea. Mother wanted to return to the surface though, and sent out avatars, for lack of a better word, human beings she possessed to prepare for her return. This brings us to 1976. Shu Mikami, the boy we see at the beginning of the game, finds a young girl Kanae washed up ashore on Yamijima. She bears a striking resemblance to his recently deceased mother, and the Mikami family take her in and care for her, Kanae eventually becoming part of the family. The Yamijima locals quickly grow suspicious of her though, not only because of the fact she washed up ashore, but also because of her aversion to light. Mother is a creature that resides in darkness after all, and so naturally her avatars have the same weakness to sunlight. This doesn't stop Kanae on her mission though. Deciding the young and naive Shu will make for a suitable sacrifice in reviving Mother, she kills his father and plans to kidnap Shu one stormy night, but the villagers catch her in the act and hunt both of them down. While Kanae and Shu try to escape, the stone walkway crumbles at their feet and they fall into the ocean. While Shu manages to find his way to safety, Kanae drowns, becoming one with Mother again.
シュウ、見ちゃダメ。見ないで。シュウ、見ないで。
In the present day, an older Shu returns to Yamijima to better understand what happened the day that Kanae died. After the tidal wave washes everyone ashore, they discover that the island is teeming with Shibito. Around this time, Mamoru meets Yuri, who is, unbeknownst to him, another of Mother's avatars. Notice how both avatars have the exact same facial features, and Yuri manages to manipulate him into opening the gates to the underworld.
見て、お願い、私を見て、本当の私の姿。
Just as Mamoru was about to be sacrificed to Mother, a girl called Ikuko shows up and rescues him. In a last-ditch attempt to escape from her imprisonment, Mother instead creates an illusion of Kanae that lures Shu to her. He realizes in his last moments that it was just a vision, but by that point, it's too late. Now that Mother is finally free, she unleashes hundreds of Yamibito onto the island, killing everything in their way, even the Shibito. Mamoru realizes that the island seems to be stuck in time. It seems the island has reverted back to that stormy night from 1976, the night when Kanae was killed. At the top of the metal tower at the center of the island, he sees what looks like a reflection or portal. He believes that Mother is hoping to climb the tower and use this portal to step into the real world. And, still feeling guilty for opening the underworld gates, Mamoru decides he's the one who has to stop her. On his way up the tower, he meets Ikuko again, who seems to have the same idea as him, and the two of them make it to the top where they face off against Mother. They manage to take her down, and another red tidal wave washes over the island, returning them back to the present day. Mamoru looks out over the sunset, relieved that the nightmare is finally over, before we see Ikuko shielding her eyes from the sunlight. Maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe it's implying she has become another one of Mother's avatars. Roll credits. That comprises the core storyline of Siren 2 anyway, and if you're wondering what became of Otoshigo, we see him more so in Yorito's story, the character who I would regard as the next main character after Mamoru, so let's talk about him a little bit. Yorito and Misawa's helicopter crash landed on Yamijima just as everything started kicking off. The rest of their squadron either died or became a Shibito, leaving them with no choice but to press on and search the island. The two of them share an interesting relationship. Misawa is Yorito's commander, so he's obviously the more experienced of the two, often using harsh words or throwing Yorito into difficult situations to harden him up as a soldier. And while this makes sense that a soldier would need thick skin, Yorito seems to grow a sort of disdain for his superior, often questioning his motives and outright disobeying Misawa when he can't see the logic in his actions.
私を信じてくれる？助けてくれる？
あんた正気かよ。前からあんたおかしいと思ってたよ。なんであんたなんだよ。なんで皆さんさあもうやってられんかよ。
I get the impression that they're very different people both morally and personality-wise, and while Yorito respected him as a commander, he did not respect him as a person, giving their relationship a very interesting dynamic. Even if these characters were probably my least favourite to play as from a gameplay perspective, theirs were the stages that were the most combat-heavy by far, I would easily regard them as my favourite characters from a narrative standpoint, especially Yorito himself, who goes through a lot of shit during the story. Misawa is actually the man who saved Harumi from Hanyuda back in Siren 1, and it seems he's been plagued with nightmares and hallucinations ever since the incident. They never go into too much detail about this, but it's something I wondered about well after finishing the game. Is it because Misawa got so close to Hanyuda, a village that had been so severely decayed by Dadatsushi's curse, that he suffers some kind of lingering after effect? Or is it simply a soldier experiencing PTSD? It's hard to say, but given the game we're playing here, my money goes on the former. His nightmares have caused him to fall into a deep depression, so much so that he seems very unaffected by what's happening around him on Yamijima. While Yorito panics at their situation, Misawa just seems to treat it like it's any other day for him, as if he welcomes death, as if death would be an escape. Later on, he meets a girl called Ichiko, who Misawa begins to interrogate after noticing her odd behaviour. His intuition is spot on, because Ichiko is actually an avatar, this time an avatar of Otoshigo, but naturally enough when Yorito encounters them and all he sees is his commander threatening a child with a gun, he shoots him without a second thought. And while he seems at peace with dying here, this is not where Misawa's story ends. After Mother is destroyed and the steel tower falls, Yorito sees that the Yamibito have laid claim to the nearby school, with dozens of them roaming the grounds. At this point, Yorito is likely on the verge of a mental breakdown given everything he's gone through, and I found him mentioning kamikaze to be a fascinating inclusion here. Most people know kamikaze, literally meaning divine wind, to be an extreme war tactic used by the Japanese in World War II, but the meaning runs a lot deeper than just that. Kamikaze embodies the Bushido code, a way of living followed by the samurai of Japan back in the day. One of the core values of Bushido was absolute loyalty and honour until death. If dying meant staying true to your cause, then so be it. During the war, this sentiment was co-opted by the Japanese army and put into much more direct words. Do not live in shame as a prisoner, die and leave no ignominious crime behind you. Yorito still stays true to this moral code. Despite being drastically outnumbered, he applies war paint and throws himself into the hordes of Yamibito, partially because he's abiding by the expectations of a soldier, and partially because he's on the brink of insanity. Afterwards, Misawa emerges from the shadows, now a hideously transformed Yamibito. Immediately, Yorito's morals are challenged by his ex-commander, now a shadow of his former self. It feels almost like a culmination of their relationship. Yorito rebelled against his superior throughout the game, but now, facing him directly, he has no choice but to put him down. This final battle feels like a metaphor. He's ending his torment both literally and figuratively. It's not all one-sided though, because I doubt Misawa wanted to return in such a hideous form, so he likely welcomes the release of death here just as much as he did in life. But the calm after the storm is short-lived because after the fight, Yorito is faced with Otoshigo himself, and, well, for one, let's just appreciate this absolutely terrifying boss design. Jesus Christ, to say it took me off guard was an understatement. Paired with the music, this was easily one of the most tense boss fights I've experienced in a long time. Exhausted from the fight with Misawa, Yorito kills Otoshigo as well, finally cleansing Yamijima of its evil. Sadly, however, Yorito is not graced with the same peaceful ending as Mamoru. He wakes up on a beach and is met with a disturbing reality, surrounded by Yamibito living their lives like normal human beings. The sky and ocean are a blood red and the sun a black hole. But unexpectedly, the Yamibito don't attack him. If anything, they look scared of him, cowering and backing away the moment they see him. In a moment of fear and anger, Yorito opens fire on everything around him before it abruptly cuts to the credits. This ending instantly reminded me of Kyoya's ending in the first Siren. At first, it's so fast and unexpected that you've no clue what you just watched. You're just left to sit there and watch the credits roll, wondering how the hell it fits into the narrative. Immediately, I thought this was Yorito at the height of insanity, now seeing visions of the Yamibito and a world stained red, like as if he's living through the events of Yamijima on repeat, haunted by what he'd seen. But the longer I thought about it, the more sobering this ending becomes. Throughout the entire game, when you'd kill Yamibito and Yamire, they just emit a black smoke. They're ghouls, after all. They're not living and breathing human beings per se, so when they die, they just go poof, right? Then why is it in Yorito's ending, the fallen Yamibito have pools of blood surrounding them? It's a terrifying thought, but it makes me wonder if Yorito is so deeply traumatized by Yamijima that he's now seeing everyday people as Yamibito. Like in Silent Hill 3, when Vincent makes Heather question every single monster she'd killed up until that point, with the simple line, "They look like monsters to you?" Yorito may have killed Otoshigo, but the nightmare never ended for him, so much so that he's become a monster himself. Yorito's entire arc is incredibly sad, and he never catches a break from the first step in Siren 2, but he was easily my favourite character because of how much he achieves despite the odds, and because of how much I felt sorry for him by the time the credits rolled. Otoshigo, funnily enough, is also somewhat of a tragic character in its own right. Notice how throughout my entire discussion of the story so far, Otoshigo hasn't really come up that much. Well, yeah, he's snubbed an awful lot in Siren 2, and I definitely think it's on purpose. Mother's intentions are very simple. She wants to return to the surface and more than likely get revenge on humanity for her imprisonment. Otoshigo, however, just wants to be reunited with Mother. His motives are a lot less, sinister, even if he possesses Ichigo to achieve them. Now, Otoshigo is not without fault. Shigeru's death is at Otoshigo's hand, and he very much intended on murdering Yorito too, but the fact that he takes so much of a backseat and is even ignored by Mother herself makes him almost sympathetic in the grand scheme of things. He spends the entire game chasing after someone who doesn't want him, and in the end, he just dies.
お前も寂しかったんだろ？私待ってた。暗い海の底で。もうすぐ一緒になれる。
His boss fight is also noticeably easier and much more straightforward than Mother's, which just makes him all the more pitiful. If you played through Siren 2 and felt Otoshigo seem like an afterthought, it's because that's exactly what he is. On purpose, of course. And this same sympathy can be applied to the Yamibito themselves, can it not? They were pushed out of Earth millions of years ago, and upon Mother's revival, they raced to the surface of Earth, finally home again. If anything, us, humanity, are the ones intruding on the Yamibito's territory. No wonder they fight and protect Mother from us. They know that if she dies, so will they. In that sense, the gods in Siren 2 feel much more fleshed out than Dadatsushi in Siren 1. Dadatsushi was more like a coincidental villain in the first game. He fell down to earth and was eaten alive by desperate villagers, and in retaliation he cursed Hanyuda. But he didn't ask to be revived by Hisako and the others. If anything, they're doing that for selfish reasons. They only want to revive him in the hopes it'll appease Dadatsushi and they'll be freed from the curse. Dadatsushi did nothing wrong, he didn't ask to go through all that. But Mother's actions in Siren 2 are very intentional. She was sealed away millennia ago by the gods, but she's taking it out on modern-day humanity, manipulating them to her will and content with letting them die on her behalf. Mother is a villain in the truest sense of the word, and Otoshigo's just kind of there, I guess. But they're much more deeply intertwined in Siren 2's story, which is a refreshing change from Siren 1. But I think the reason why I was less overall impressed with the story in Siren 2 is because I kind of feel like I've done it all before. Yes, the characters and gods are different, but I would still say at its core, it's following mostly the same story beats as Siren 1. Mamoru and Yuri's short-lived companionship reminded me a bit of Kyoya and Miyako. Ichiko, much like Tomoko, is another young girl fated to meet a tragic end. There's the final boss fight where you rely on a mystical item that will put an end to the god once and for all. You know, at its core, they're all the same concepts. And the thing is, that core concept is really good, and I ate the story up all the same. It's just a little bit less memorable to me because I feel like I can draw too many parallels between the two. Siren 2 is still excellent, of course, it just feels like we're retreading the same ground a bit here. But the thing is, I feel you could make this argument the other way around too. If I played Siren 2 first and then went back and played the first game, I would have said this exact same thing. So this isn't specifically a Siren 2 issue, it's probably more that Siren is not a game that would be sustainable as a franchise. Imagine they made like 5 Siren games and they all followed that same formula. Of course, it would eventually go stale. But I'm not bashing the game, do not get me wrong, there are so many positives here. In terms of the player experience, Siren 2 is leaps and bounds better than Siren 1. Don't forget, there's the gameplay and enemy variety that we've gone over, but also the puzzles and obscure progression of Siren 1 have been dialed down a lot here. Not to mention the general quality of life improvements like color coordinated stages in the Link Navigator and hints that nudge you in the right direction during the loading screens. Overall, while Siren 1 was easily a 9 out of 10 minimum in terms of difficulty and obscurity, Siren 2 is more like a 5 or 6. Still very much a challenge, but not a needlessly cruel one. It's even a massive improvement visually. It still has that photorealistic look, but it feels like the technology was refined in the few years between releases, and any of the goofy faces you might have seen in Siren 1 are pretty much non-existent here. It can't be argued that Siren 2 is a much bigger and, at least mechanically, much better game. But that does beg the question, does bigger always mean better? No, not always. To me, Siren 1's simplicity was its greatest strength. It felt like a very focused experience, a great example of less is more. Taking Resident Evil as an example again, it's like how I personally prefer the first game over the second game. And I'm not talking about the 2002 remake, by the way, I'm talking about the real OG 1996 shit here. Sure, Raccoon City is a more sprawling, impressive landscape, but nothing beats the simple ingenuity of the Spencer Mansion to me. Yeah, Mr. X showing up throughout the game is mechanically super impressive for a PS1 title, but who's more iconic to me? The Tyrant, for sure. The liquor might be more well known and synonymous with the Resident Evil name, but what strikes more fear into me? Hunters, absolutely. I can acknowledge that something is fundamentally better, but that doesn't mean it has to be my personal favourite. And that's how I see Siren 1 and 2. Yeah, 2 improves upon so many things, and I would absolutely recommend someone play it over the first game, especially if they're not used to survival horror, but 1 still comes out on top for me. And I bet you, despite everything I've just said, there's still going to be someone out there who thinks my critiques mean that I hate Siren 2, and that is not true, oh my god. Generally speaking, the more I care about something, the more willing I am to critique it. I mean, why would I expend all this energy on something I don't care about? It's more like Siren 1 is up here, and Siren 2 is like one down, like just one notch, you know what I mean? The story is just as strong, the soundtrack is different in a good way to Siren 1, the gameplay is far more accessible, not to mention very impressive for its age, and it still absolutely ranks as one of the strongest PS2 survival horror titles for me. Plus, it has a very cool and very unexpected unlockable. After you beat the game once on normal or higher, we see the return of a very familiar face.
お前らみたいなのがいる限り俺は何度でも現れる。
It's a bonus stage where you just endlessly mow down Yamibito for as long as you can to get a high score, a pretty therapeutic power trip to wind down after the chaos of the main story. It's also just nice knowing Kyoya is still technically alive and well, even though I'd be lying if I said I didn't get a bit emotional seeing his missing person poster in the archives. Okay, so you've made it this far into the video. We're 2 games down, but before we take the leap to the PS3 and have a look at Siren Blood Curse, I want to take a slight detour, a little breather, if you will, to talk a little bit about how the Siren games actually put a great deal of effort into their promotion and advertising. Now, some of you Siren fans watching, you know, all 3 of you, probably already know about this, but the original Siren game actually released to a little bit of controversy in Japan at first. Remember that scene with Tomoko finally finding her parents in the church? This was the basis for a television advertisement for Siren that ended up getting pulled from TV networks because it was deemed to be too scary for children, and, you know, I can kinda see why, actually.
Siren.
PlayStation.
This advert was stopped from airing on November 3rd, only 3 days before the game's official release in Japan, and ironically, it actually ended up really helping the sales of the game. I mean, if you heard about a game with a television ad that was so scary it had to be taken off air, then the game itself must be even scarier. The Siren 2 ad is pretty chilling too. The room slowly deteriorates and the guy is seemingly spirited away before our own eyes, with Siren 2's tagline saying, "Nigeba nante nai yo," meaning there's no way out. Though there's another advertisement, this time for Siren 1, that doesn't get nearly enough attention. This one was my first ever exposure to Siren, the first thing I ever saw about this game, and it shook me to my core. I couldn't understand what I was looking at, but I also just couldn't stop watching. Obviously, having now played the games, there's definitely some things I notice. The Red Sea, the missing posters of people I presume are from Haneda. But back in the day, having little to no knowledge of the games, there was one thing that this trailer instantly reminded me of. The Ring. I mentioned briefly at the beginning of the video that Siren came out amidst the J-horror golden era of the late 90s and early 2000s, and so this trailer wears its inspiration on its sleeve, bearing a striking resemblance to the infamous tape in The Ring, the original Japanese movie that is, not the shitty American remake. When Siren 2 rolled around, Toyama wanted to take this one step further. How about instead of just a trailer, they made an entire horror movie? The game that was almost like an homage to J-horror movies becomes a J-horror movie. It all comes full circle. You know, like The Ring, full circle. And make a J-horror movie they did. As a means of both promoting the series and bringing Siren to a brand new audience in general, there was in fact a Siren movie, released on February 9th, 2006 in Japan, the exact same day as Siren 2's release. It was directed by Yukihiko Tsutsumi, who had directed a good number of television shows and movies by that point, his most popular work being a mystery thriller TV show called Keizoku that aired in 1999, and Trick, a comedy that spawned multiple TV seasons and films. Despite the film's release coinciding with Siren 2 though, it takes inspiration from both of the games. Very loosely though, mind you. There won't be any recognizable faces here besides the Shibito themselves, as it's meant to capture the essence of a Siren story more so than directly adapted. Check this out though, I even managed to get the special edition DVD release. It's pretty slick, honestly. The tagline for the movie is Siren ga nattara soto ni dete wa naranai, which means when the siren sounds, don't go outside. The movie markets itself as the world's first sound cycle thriller, and I have absolutely no clue what that means, so I guess we'll find out, yeah? Taking it out of its case, it comes with 2 DVDs, a little notebook that talks about some behind-the-scenes antics, has some neat artwork, pretty cool, and then there's a mail guard seal, just like a tiny little holographic square. I think it's a privacy thing you used for letters and mail back in the day when people still sent mail. I'm about 2 decades late buying this DVD, so I'm never going to have a use for this, but it's cool seeing the kind of retro trinkets that came in these kind of things, isn't it? But yeah, really nice packaging, and a pretty out-of-the-way piece of Siren merchandise to own too. Not many people even know this movie exists, let alone have their hands on a legitimate DVD. Okay, so let's get right into it. Like I said, the Siren movie is more of an homage to Siren than it is a direct adaptation. It does follow the second game a bit more closely than it does the first, but I would overall say that it's a blend of both games' ideas in one. It does take place on Yamijima Island, but what's important to note is it's not the same Yamijima as Siren 2, something you'd only know if you look at the kanji. Yeah, okay, so I know that sounds very confusing, so quick little language lesson here. Jima means island, nice and simple, whereas Yami is broken up into 2 kanji characters. In the game, it's the characters Ya, which means night, and Mi, which means to see, whereas in the movie, the Mi part is changed to the character for beauty. So at the end of the day, they're both pronounced the exact same, Yamijima, but the spelling is different. It's a play on words, effectively. There you go, a little bit of linguistics for you. So it's pretty clear that these are 2 different places in Japanese, but this wordplay is kinda lost in English, which is probably very confusing for someone watching this movie thinking, this doesn't look like the Yamijima from the games, you know, and yeah, that's because they're not the same place at all. But yes, knowing this going forward, let's do a play-by-play of what happens in this movie. We start off in the year 1976, seeing a bunch of rescue workers searching around some houses for survivors. They don't seem to be having any luck until they arrive at this one, where a man is talking to himself. When they ask him what happened, he doesn't respond, instead just saying the same words over and over again. When the siren sounds, don't go outside. Almost with comedic timing, the siren goes off and the man starts losing his mind. It cuts to Yuki, the main character, on a boat heading towards Yamijima Island with her father and younger brother. They seem to imply that the brother Hideo needs to get away from the city and that living on the island will be good for him, but when they arrive, they find a lot of the other villagers to be very standoffish and unwelcoming, which gives Yuki the heebie-jeebies. By the way, fans of J-horror might recognize Yuki's actress. Her name is Yui Ichikawa, and she also played Chiharu in the Ju-on the Grudge series of movies. Horror definitely seems to be her thing, anyway. While they're cleaning up their new home, their neighbour comes by to help out, but during some idle chit-chat, she gives Yuki a familiar ominous warning. When the siren sounds, don't go outside. Naturally enough, this creeps out Yuki even more, and she's starting to become convinced that there's something weird going on at Yamijima. The only person who seems any bit normal is the local doctor Minamida, who tries to reassure Yuki that the islanders are just very introverted and not used to outsiders. On the way home, Yuki stumbles upon an abandoned house and finds a red notebook ominously talking about a siren. She's rudely interrupted by a homeless guy who, once again, starts warning her not to go outside if you hear the siren, but he freaks her out and she runs off home. Things just seem to get worse and worse for Yuki as time goes on. Hideo keeps running off, which is something he does a lot in this movie. Her dad starts acting cold and distant towards her, and she keeps seeing a strange woman dressed in red. She's convinced that the siren has something to do with all of this, and after some research she learns that back in 1976, a bunch of people went missing on the island, leaving only one survivor left who then committed suicide. It seems to tie into local folklore to do with a red mermaid. But Yuki's decided she's had enough of all this and plans to escape from the island with Hideo. But Hideo has run off, again, and she finds him hanging out near the steel tower with the lady in red. The whole time I was watching this movie, I was like, damn, this lady looks really familiar, and I realized that she's the same voice actress and face model for Kanai and Yuri in Siren 2, which is really cool. Hideo goes to sleep and Yuki finds shelter in a nearby house to figure out what to do next before the weirdo from earlier comes along. He warns her that she has to stay inside or else she'll become one of them, and right on cue, the Shibito start breaking into the house. He tells her the only way to put an end to this is to stop the siren before the Shibito decide to have him for dinner. Yuki and Hideo go back home to grab some supplies before she stumbles upon a bunch of old photos showing the villagers from 1976, Minamida included, realizing that everyone she's met on the island are all the same villagers who died back in 1976. Maybe they're ghosts or they're stuck in some kind of time loop. Yuki and Hideo's dad shows up, now newly Shibito-fied, and starts smashing up the place looking for the two of them. And this section of the film, as brief as it is pretty great. To be honest, it's probably the only really scary or intense part of the movie, but I feel it emulates the tension you feel encountering a Shibito in the games pretty well. Yuki and Hideo make their way to the steel tower, the origin of the siren sound. When she makes it to the top, she smashes the siren, but for some reason, it doesn't stop the sound. Minamida followed her up the ladder and tells her that there's no siren and it's all in her head, but this just confuses Yuki even more. He also drops the bombshell that her brother Hideo was dead the entire time, meaning the boy we've been seeing throughout the film was actually a figment of Yuki's imagination. Yep, this movie pulls probably the most cliche horror twist you could ever do. It was all in your mind the entire time, Hideo died 6 months ago. It's kinda lame, not gonna lie. I did notice the kid seemed distant the entire movie, even his movement seemed really robotic, and I just chalked it down to the kid being a bad actor to be honest, but no, it's because he's a hallucination, I guess. Even the dad never directly speaks to Hideo once in the entire movie, but then when you know the twist, I guess it makes sense, doesn't it? It's not that the twist is badly executed per se, in fact it makes perfect sense when you notice how everyone in the movie was giving Yuki strange looks the whole time. It's just that it's like the oldest trick in the book, and I feel like the Siren games wouldn't have relied on something so cliche, but what can you do? You gotta take it for what it is. Deciding she has nothing left to live for now knowing that Hideo is dead, Yuki jumps off the metal tower, but it's all good, she survives, somewhat miraculously. Minamida concludes that Yuki has multiple personality disorder and reads the red notebook that she was holding onto. On the final page, it says that when the fourth siren sounds, everyone will die. Hearing the siren go off, Yuki appears behind the doctor with a knife, presumably beginning her murderous tirade. The sea turns a blood red and we see the woman in red with a somber look before the screen fades to black. So then what to make of the Siren movie? It's not a bad movie. I definitely feel like you can tell the people behind this movie did their research. It feels like it repurposes a lot of elements from the games into a story that is more succinct and simpler for a movie runtime. I mean, the games take like 15 hours to beat and that gives them ample time to tell a complex story, but that would be way harder to do in a 2-hour movie, so they had to trim it down, right? But even despite that, Siren could still leave you very confused on a first viewing, so piecing together the bits we're given, my take on the story is this. When Yuki is researching about the island, she learns that Yamijima used to be a place where people with incurable diseases were quarantined. At the same time, she learns about the folk legend of a mermaid whose blood and flesh had healing properties and could even grant immortality. Because of that, the villagers ate her alive one day, be it out of desperation or even just greed. And in her last moments, the mermaid cursed the entire island, subjecting them to eternal life. And this would explain why Yuki found photos of the villagers from 1976 looking identical as they are now. Notice the striking similarity to Dadatsushi and Hisako in the first game, with the whole god cursing someone to immortality thing. Now, we know by the ending that the fourth siren means everyone will die, and remember, the siren is all in Yuki's head, so in my opinion, the siren is the curse. Maybe every couple of decades or centuries, the mermaid picks her target, someone who, upon hearing the fourth siren, will go crazy and kill everyone. The sirens are almost like a countdown to them going insane, their slow descent into madness, and this makes sense because as we hear the four sirens throughout the movie, progressively more and more bad things happen to Yuki. She starts getting paranoid that the villagers are out to get her, and that her family are becoming distant from her. This of course culminates in the Shibito attack. She's literally seeing the villagers as monsters. But why Yuki, though? My guess is that the woman in red, perhaps a physical manifestation of the mermaid, preyed on Yuki's fragile mental state to be her puppet, someone to commit mass murder on her behalf as revenge on humanity for what they did to her centuries prior. Sort of akin to Mother in Siren 2. Well, at least this is how I take it. A lot of it is left up for interpretation, and again, that style of vague storytelling works well in the games because there's loads of archives and gameplay segments that fill in the gaps for you. Movies don't have that luxury, and I think this is exactly where the Siren movie suffers. I can see how it's got the DNA of the games, it's got all the hallmarks, the folk horror legend in a small secluded village, the Shibito, even though I'm going to assume they're just hallucinations here and they don't actually exist, and the Red Sea, which, much like in the first game, represents the spilled blood of the god or deity central to the story. But I feel like the only reason I can make this educated guess on the story and what actually happened is because I played the games, so I kinda know how Siren works now, I know its quirks. If you went into this blind, I feel you'd struggle to make sense of it by the credits, though that being said, a lot of people feel this exact same way when they finish the games too. They're definitely stories that you need to let simmer in your brain before you can start to unpack them. If my theory is even close to being right, then that's a pretty cool plot. I feel it absolutely lines up with something you'd see in the games, which is something we cannot say about the vast majority of video game adaptations, though personally I wish the film story leaned into the mermaid curse more instead of the whole Hideo was dead the whole time storyline. It spends way more time on the latter when that is definitely the far less interesting, far more generic plot thread between the two. Why they chose Hideo to be the primary focus of the story is honestly kind of baffling to me. Though, like I said, there are some little nods to the games that I really appreciated. Yuki's dad is a paranormal journalist in the movie, his full name being Shinichi Yamamoto, and if you happen to pick up archive number 34 in Siren 2, you'll see that the article is written by Shinichi himself. This is really cool, the way they link the games and the movies. I really like that. With all that being said though, the film actually did pretty well in Japan, and I absolutely recommend it if you're a fan of the Siren games, or just J-horror cinema in general. If you really didn't like the movie ending though, then have no fear. A novelization of the film came out around the same time, and going by my research, it has a different ending to the movie, which is fascinating, really, because it'd be really cool if they did the ending, better. It's not very long, it's less than 200 pages, and it literally follows the story beats of the film identically. Like, down to the lines of dialogue being the exact same between the film and book. If you're hoping to read a more fully fleshed out version of the film's events, you will be disappointed. The novel doesn't elaborate more on Yuki and her family, the island, the siren, nothing. It's kind of a wasted opportunity, honestly, because I was hoping the novelization would have maybe deviated and built on the concepts further. The only notable difference is it's written in the second-person perspective, so the sentences are written like, you did this and you went there. That is a very uncommon writing style in books, so that was kind of interesting to see. Anyway, about that different ending though, so it follows the film scene by scene, word by word, up until Yuki jumps off the metal tower. The last chapter is just called The Truth of Yuki Yamamoto, and to summarize, Minamida calls a colleague of his called Minami, who works as a doctor in another city. He recounts Yuki's story to her and explains her illness, but eventually the phone is cut off and the lights go out in Minami's room. She looks out the window to see a red sea in the distance and then hears the siren, and that's it. Yeah, that's just where it ends. Like, most of the chapter is spent recounting Yuki's illness and exposition dumping, but why exactly is Minami hearing the siren? Does it mean that the Red Mermaid's curse has spread out beyond Yamijima? Unfortunately, we're not given enough information to know for sure. The only part of this different ending that I found to be interesting is the fact that Minamida actually survives here and isn't killed off by Yuki like he is in the movie, but yeah, that's it. So, should you read the book or watch the film? That entirely depends on your preferences, but I would say the book is a little bit simplistic in its writing style. It's very basic and maybe even a bit boring, so I would personally go for the film myself. Though fair warning that a lot of the translations of the Siren movie online are very poor, either with misspellings or downright being incorrect, so you have been warned. I hate to say it, but the best way to experience the Siren movie and book is, well, speaking Japanese. But now it's time to say goodbye to Yamijima so we can move on to the third and final entry in the Siren franchise. And this time we're heading to Haneda? Wait, what? Again? Huh? Yep, we're going back to Haneda this time. Siren Blood Curse is actually a sorta remake of the original game. I think reimagining is a much more fitting word for it. It takes the original story and replaces more or less everyone with American counterparts. This was mainly done in an attempt to not only modernize the original game, but also to make it appealing to a wider audience. Siren 1 being set in Japan with Japanese characters and a plot that is very much steeped in Japanese culture and history, the devs were probably aware that it slightly alienates Western audiences, even though that's more so the Western audience's fault for being too narrow-minded to enjoy Asian media than it is the developer's fault, but whatever. The original is slow-paced, not terribly action-heavy, and it favours atmosphere over epic set pieces, all of which are things that Americans apparently don't like, judging by Siren 1 sales. Don't shoot the messenger. As a European, it makes absolutely no difference to me either way, so you guys can squabble amongst yourselves, I don't care, I get to play more Siren. Siren Blood Curse released in July 2008, but this one's a bit different in that it released in individual chapters on the PS3 store back in the day. The PS3 and Xbox 360 era was when games were really starting to become a lot more cinematic and tried to stand tall alongside TV shows and movies. It was pretty typical for games back then to emulate an episodic format to achieve that, and Blood Curse is just one of many examples. There were 12 episodes total, and you could either buy them one by one at your own pace, or just buy them all in one go. In essence, you were getting a full AAA game for only a fraction of the price. While most games in the PS3 era had the full €50 price tag, Blood Curse was only 20, a pretty sweet deal in my books. It did also get a physical release, but only in Asia and Europe, not America for some reason. Damn, they really had it out for you guys, didn't they? This episodic format also means they did away with the Link Navigator from the previous two games, instead opting for more streamlined traditional storytelling instead of the non-linear format that jumped around the timeline a lot in Siren 1 and 2. Immediately, the first thing I noticed was the absolutely gorgeous menus in this game. Siren games always had great looking menus and UI from the first step. Not only were they neatly organised and easy to understand, but they just looked really sleek. Blood Curse takes the cake though. The striking blood red main screen, the inverted colours on the episode menu, the ripple effect, it's all just really pretty to look at. And much like Siren 2, Blood Curse has difficulty options again this time, which is great to see. So let's jump right in. Because it's a reimagining, all of the characters we remember from Siren 1 show up again as Western counterparts, but the story generally follows all the same beats. We start off, of course, with our new Kyoya, this time called Howard Wright, an American teen who recently moved to Japan with his family. He encounters a group of cultists performing a ritual in Haneda, and after interrupting the ceremony, he's immediately pursued by a cop Shibito.
Hey, wait, what are you? No! Shit!
After a brief struggle, Howard ends up being shot and falls into a river, much like in the original. This same ritual was witnessed by a television crew comprised of the recently divorced Sam and Melissa, their daughter Bella, and their cameraman Saul. Clearly, their divorce was a rocky one, and the two begin to bicker, before the siren goes off and they all fall unconscious. When they wake up, they've all been separated and were thrown headfirst into the gameplay. Blood Curse is definitely the series at its strongest from a gameplay perspective. Not only does it carry over all of the improvements from Siren 2, like the faster movement, more accessible map, and less obtuse puzzles, but sightjacking got a pretty major overhaul as well. Instead of the tuning dial detection of enemies like before, you look around, find yourself a Shibito to sightjack, and then you can lock onto their sight with square. After doing that, the screen will split in two, your pursuer's perspective on one side while you can continue playing on the other. And this is a really cool change-up. Before, you kinda had to drop everything just to sightjack, which worked with the slower, more strategic gameplay from before, but being able to move around, pick up things, and solve puzzles all while keeping an eye on the enemy's movements is a massive game changer, especially when you can see them slowly approaching your current position, knowing that they'll see you the second they turn the corner. It's something that I imagine was probably too technically advanced for the PS2, so it's great that the leap to PS3 hardware has made it possible. And if you notice the crazy frame rate drop, that's not my console chugging or anything, that's literally just the way it is. It takes a little while to get used to, not gonna lie, but I have a feeling it's the trade-off for being able to move and sightjack at the same time now. You can do it, but it will obscure your vision a bit. The sound you hear when a Shibito is nearby has been changed as well, and thank God for that. I was not lying when I said I found Siren 2's sound effect to be incredibly distracting. I really like the mechanic, and it's a lot more fair on the player, but I think a slightly more subtle sound choice wouldn't have gone amiss, and Blood Curse instead opts for a heartbeat sound effect that kicks in whenever a Shibito is a few meters away. Much more subtle and much more on brand for survival horror. I like that a lot. And that's not the only returning mechanic either. Remember how Akiko from Siren 2 could see visions of the past when she sightjacks? That returns here too, this time used by Amana, the cult lady antagonist who's a stand-in for good old Hisako, and surprise surprise, it is just as underutilized here as it was in Siren 2. I get the impression that the dev team just likes sticking to the good old sightjacking, but they were like, we have to do something new though. So they make up a mechanic for like 2 stages, and then they're just like, alright, okay, we're good. We can go back to the good old faithful now. It'd probably explain why they introduced a cool mechanic 2 games in a row only to end up not really using it. It functions the exact same here though. The controller will vibrate, and when you sightjack, the visions of the past will be denoted by a yellow symbol here, usually nudging you in the right direction to continue the story. Much like Siren 2, it works really well. And much like Siren 2, I wish it was in the game a bit more, but what can you do? Something that's brand new though is the ability to brace doors when a Shibito is trying to break in. A really cool option to give the player, but I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really end up using it very much. I suppose playing all of the games back to back, I kinda just forgot it even existed in this one. Usually my tactic was to just run, but yeah, it does work well. You gotta shake the controller to keep your body weight on the door. It doesn't get rid of the Shibito per se, they'll probably try to get in via a different route if possible, but it's a cool last-ditch attempt to keep them from breaking into the room. Enemies-wise, of course, there's no Yamibito here, we're back in Hanyuda after all, so it's just plain old Shibito roaming around again, and they are looking as good as ever. You have the plain regular Shibito, the fly Shibito, which, may I say, look particularly gross in this game. It's hard to see unless you're really up close to them, but their eyes have bug wings sprouting out of them, which is just absolutely foul. It's great. The spider Shibito returns as well, and they can really gang up on you very easily, covering a lot of ground crawling on all fours. Thankfully, you really only start to see them in the latter half of the game. An enemy design that is brand new though is the maggot Shibito. You don't encounter these guys very often because they are really tough. You're as good as dead if they catch you, and they offer the closest thing to boss fights in this game if you ever come face to face with one. Fighting all of these Shibito though is much the same as the original. Your best bet is finding a weapon as soon as the stage starts to protect yourself going forward. You don't really wield a gun ever unless you're playing as Saiga, so if you ever do have to engage in combat, it'll only ever really be the physical kind. Overall, it's pretty hard to fault the gameplay in Blood Curse. It takes the strengths of the previous 2 games and combines them into an even better experience. Not to mention, it's just great being able to run around Hanyuda again, now all jazzed up with pretty graphics. You have the Erato shopping district, the fields, the church, the hospital. It's all back and still looks really great for a game that is now well over a decade old. The lighting and character models look fantastic too despite their age, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss the photorealism from the other 2 games. I get that they probably felt the uncanny look of that design might have been off-putting to some people, plus everything on the PS3 was racing to have the best graphics possible, so from a technical standpoint I completely understand the switch to full 3D rendering, but the photorealism was such a strong part of Siren's identity to me. It's sad to see it go. And like I said earlier, photos can't really age, but 3D graphics certainly can. I would actually argue that visually speaking, Blood Curse has aged worse than Siren 1. But this is just a personal preference, and as with before, the voice actors offer their likeness to the characters, as well as doing all of the motion capture, so even if the visual flair of the previous 2 games is gone now, the actors in Blood Curse were still very much involved in bringing the characters to life, both in voice and in appearance. And speaking of the characters, this definitely seems to be an area of intense debate among Siren fans, you know, all 3 of us. Some people find the Western cast to be way more annoying and unlikable compared to Siren 1, and I just don't agree, to be honest. I think they're fine. Instead of the 10-man ensemble cast of Siren 1, Blood Curse whittles it down to about 6 or 7 total, and you'll notice pretty quickly that multiple characters' personality traits from Siren 1 are typically blended into one character in Blood Curse, presumably for the sake of a more compact story. Melissa, for example, has the arrogance and self-important attitude of Naoko, but the unexpected capability and confidence of Yoriko. Saiga wields a hunting rifle much like Akira, but has the personality of both Shiro and Miyako's brother Jun. That is to say, in other words, he is a massive asshole. But the point I'm trying to make is that while I adore the range of characters in the original, I can definitely understand why Blood Curse's more condensed story is easier to digest for a lot of people. Plus, it's not like the characters are all complete one-for-one copies. Saiga is very comparable to Shiro, but he's corrupt in a very different way, I found, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. Melissa and Sam's faltering relationship and how it negatively impacts Bella throughout the events of the game adds an interesting dynamic that was completely absent in the original. The only character who's identical to their original counterpart really is Miyako herself, with only two slight differences. She's not blind anymore, and in Siren 1 she was 14 years old, whereas in Blood Curse she's in her late teens. Her personality is much the same, but where young Miyako may have acted more bratty and childish, older Miyako treats it with the maturity you'd expect from a young adult, still managing to be just as sympathetic and tragic by the end. I was really surprised and happy to hear that Miyako is played by the exact same actress as she was in Siren 1. It's really cool that she was willing to come back and reprise the role years later. And as for Howard himself, I found him to be just as likeable as Kyoya. He still has Kyoya's naive, albeit well-meaning nature, and I found him to be very endearing, maybe even more so at times, especially when he struggles to communicate with Miyako due to his limited Japanese. This was an intentional design choice this time. The fact that the cast is a blend of Japanese and American characters often leads to a breakdown in communication between the two. I mean, imagine being in a situation as dire as this only to find everyone around you is speaking a foreign language you can barely understand, if at all. Howard has some basic Japanese, sure, but not nearly enough to hold a full conversation with Miyako. The best he's able to manage is getting her name, and everything he says to her after that is usually brief, broken Japanese, just about enough to get him by.
僕はハワード・ライトです、OK？ 二人一緒逃げる頑張る僕はハワード君はOK Miyako 一緒頑張る
Saiga, on the other hand, has pretty fluent English with a noticeable accent, but he manages to communicate just fine with Howard and Sam on multiple occasions. It's just something you don't really see in video games very often, and I really liked that layer of realism to the characters in Blood Curse.
Do I look like a monster? Are you crazy?
Again, my apologies. But this is a matter of life and death, after all. I'd rather have people think I'm crazy than therefore being polite.
I don't believe this.
Saiga's voice actor and face model, Hattori Seiji, spent a long time perfecting his English pronunciation before recording his lines.
サイガっていう役がやっぱバイリンガルと設定ってもう聞いてたんで発音とかを習ったり台本のものはこうさらっと言えるようにはしてきたつもりだったんですけど皆さんの目にはどう映るのでしょうか
Well, I think he did a pretty good job. The soundtrack is really good this time too. The composer for the original game, Hitomi Shimizu, returned again to compose for Blood Curse, and dare I say it, it might even exceed the original game's OST in some respects. It's a much more varied OST, offering more fast-paced, blood-pumping tracks alongside these slower, creepier ones. A lot of the instrumentation and sounds you heard in the original can be heard again here, but used in different ways, and it's really cool seeing a fresh spin on the old soundtrack, with of course plenty of original songs to keep it from being too familiar. And okay, I gotta give a special shout out to this absolute banger. You hear it playing in one of the houses you go through as Bella, and I was pretty content sitting in this closet for a few minutes and letting this absolute tune play in the background. No lie, I had this on repeat for most of the script writing and editing process of this video. Thank you, Siren Blood Curse, for giving us this gem. Actually, while we're on the topic of music and sound design and all that, Blood Curse easily has my favourite game over screen in the entire series. It's just really creepy compared to the much more subtle game over screens in Siren 1 and 2, I really like it. And for any of you who might have played this back in the day, you might still be wondering what the hell they're even saying here because it kind of sounds like gibberish. Turns out they're saying Kirito Yaerenzo, which doesn't actually mean anything in Japanese, rather it's an accented way of saying the Greek phrase Kyrie eleison, a biblical phrase that means Lord have mercy. Very random, but this is a question that plagued me for literally years, so if you're anything like me, you're welcome. So then, with all that being said, how about we have an old looky at the story in Blood Curse this time around? Obviously there's going to be a lot of overlap with Siren 1 as I recount this, so I'll keep it brief while letting you know of any major differences. So Howard ends up finding Miyako before they're interrupted by Saiga. He says Miyako is obligated to fulfill her duty for the village. Howard manages to ward him off despite his threats, and the two of them rest in an abandoned house. Much like the original, Miyako is part of the Kajiro family, destined to be sacrificed to revive a god, the sacrifice that Howard interrupted earlier on. As thanks, she gives him her blood to protect him from becoming a Shibito. Miyako is taken away by Amana to attempt the ritual once more, and when Howard infiltrates the Shibito nest in an effort to rescue her, Howard finds Bella, now as a Shibito. Before getting much time to react, he's shot dead by Melissa behind him. Suddenly, we find ourselves all the way back at the beginning of the game again, waking up on the riverside. Howard manages to find Miyako again, and she explains that they'll be stuck in this infinite loop, doomed to repeat this reality over and over again unless they do something about the ritual. But as in the last timeline, Amana eventually catches up to them and takes Miyako to her death. Around the same time as this, Melissa turns into a maggot Shibito and chases Bella into the Shibito nest. Sam follows after them in an attempt to rescue his daughter. Howard makes it just in time to see the god's revival.
Now the gates of paradise shall open.
Miyako! Miyako!
Daddy!
No! I'm too late! This is exactly as the prophecy said!
Daddy!
No, Bella! Stay back! It's too dangerous!
Daddy!
Hey! Wait! Bella! We gotta run! Get away from us!
No, this isn't how it's supposed to be.
Rather than Dadatsushi, Blood Curse's god is called Kaiko, but the backstory there is much the same. Centuries ago, villagers ate the god's body during a famine and it let out a sharp cry, its siren, cursing Amana to eternal life. Now resurrected in the present day, Howard decides to follow after Kaiko, hoping to kill it and end the cycle, but he's stopped by Saiga, who gives him the Urian, the mystical religious statue that helped kill Dadatsushi as well back in Siren 1 if you remember. Saiga then decides to test Howard's ability. After all, if he can't kill another human, how on earth could he kill a god? Howard manages to take him down and Saiga seems to welcome his death, finally able to rest after being freed from the looping timeline. We move on to fighting Kaiko and whew, what a trippy boss fight this is. I mean, visually it is very cool, but god, I feel like I'm tripping on acid or something, man. Jesus. Miyako's soul guides him during the battle and he manages to take down the god, ending the curse on Hanyuda. Amana, on the other hand, seems to be trapped forever in Kaiko's dimension. Just like Kyoya in the original, the Kajiro blood running through Howard's veins prevents him from ever returning to the real world, and he vows to kill off any remaining Shibito in Miyako's honor, forever destined to wander alone in a desolate Hanyuda village. And yes, we get a pretty dope metal outro too.
This is my promise to Miyako.
But the story doesn't end just yet. After Kaiko's destruction and the village is freed from its time loop, it causes a dimensional rift that Bella and Sam fall into, sending them back in time. Seeing a vision of the past hundreds of years ago, Sam realizes that the villager who ate Kaiko and was cursed with immortality was, in fact, Bella. In other words, Amana is an adult Bella. Landing in the year 1976, Sam decides in a moment of desperation that the only way to keep Bella alive is for the loop to continue. He waits 3 long decades before sending an email to Howard, inviting him to Hanyuda, kickstarting the events of the game all over again and therefore continuing the loop, unaware that by doing so, he's dooming his own daughter to eternity in a barren void. But of course, waiting 30 years means he grew old by the time 2007 rolled around, and as we learn in one of the archived newspapers, he died only a few days before the Haneda incident, with the authorities having described him as confused and incoherent before falling victim to a heart attack. My guess is the trauma from losing his entire family, combined with the stress of knowing he would have to relive it all over again, is what caused this death. Or maybe the entire looping timeline is Kaiko's work, and when Sam fulfills his purpose, he's effectively killed off. It's something you could easily argue is the work of a higher being. It certainly makes sense given the almost ironic timing of his death, but of course in classic Siren fashion, we are not given the answer. This is left for you to decide. This all happens, of course, while the Sam of that timeline innocently travels to Haneda, oblivious to the fact an elderly, time-travelling version of himself is out there, and would also explain his confusion when Howard confronts him about the email.
Hey, what's your name? Howard Wright. My name's Sam Monroe. If you see my Bella again, please make sure she's okay.
Wait, you're Sam Monroe? So you're the one who sent me the message.
I don't know what you're talking about.
This Sam is doomed to eventually go back in time and suffer the same fate as his elder self. In that sense, Sam, in my opinion, is the real antagonist of the story. He was the one who brought a 10-year-old Bella to an unknown, possibly dangerous village in a foreign country, and yet instead of accepting the consequences of those actions, he instead tries to desperately keep her alive, repeating his past mistakes and forcing her to relive the curse over and over again. He seems to justify all this by pushing the blame over to Howard, convincing himself that it's his fault all of this happened. Not only did he harass both Howard and his family with threatening phone calls and messages according to Howard's personal blog, but when Sam sends an email to him trying to coax Howard into visiting Haneda, he uses very condescending language, ending it with, "Are you feeling a little scared? Maybe you should be, but I know you'll come. Your damsel in distress awaits." The damsel, of course, referring to Miyako. Sam seems to be convinced that Howard only saved Miyako for selfish reasons, and so in his head, this apparently justifies the manipulation of an innocent teenager. Howard's blog is an actual website, by the way, or, well, at least it was. Back in the day, you could read posts written by Howard that have since been archived by fans, where he says he made the blog to keep in touch with his American friends and to practice his Japanese. It's really cute reading his posts practicing his language ability. They read with a very, "my name is Howard, I like this, I like that" kind of energy to them, with some misspellings and grammar mistakes along the way. Very natural for someone still learning the basics of a language, of course, but it's such a realistic attention to detail, well worth checking out the blog if you get the chance. In his final post, he attaches a picture of a strange stick formation he found on the ground, unaware that it's a mana cross, the symbol of the mana religion. He writes that he's lost his way near Haneda and just wants to go home. Scrolling down to the comments then, it's honestly heartbreaking to read all of the messages left by concerned family and friends, all of who will never see Howard again. Back to Amana, or Bella, though. This new angle they took with her story was a really fascinating choice to me. I did not see it coming whatsoever. I'll admit, at first I thought Amana was a much more generic cult lady, especially compared to Hisako in Siren 1, who was a very calm and collected character, something that ultimately made her much more threatening. She didn't go on dramatic tangents about the legacy of the Kajiro family or whatever. She put on a very sweet, angelic demeanour when her actions were anything but. Amana didn't have that subtlety at first, so I was thinking, whatever, this is a miss compared to the original, but then little did I know I was playing as a young Amana for the entire game, and the ending loops back into the beginning. It was crazy, and really well done. But when Bella went back in time, how did she end up becoming a central figure in Haneda? This is another big difference between Siren 1 and Blood Curse. When Dadatsushi fell to Earth and was eaten alive by desperate villagers, it was only coincidental that Hisako was the one cursed with immortality. It could have happened to anyone else just as easily. In Blood Curse, however, Bella was taken in by the villagers and believed to be a goddess because of her blonde hair, a rarity, of course, in rural Japan. This belief grew stronger when Kaiko descended upon the earth and a starving Bella devoured the god, then, of course, cursed with immortality. This moment in time is preserved on an ancient scroll that we can see in the archives. As the centuries went by and Bella's memory of the past became hazy, she took on the name of Amana and started the Mana religion in an attempt to appease Kaiko and free both herself and Haneda from the curse. This explains why a sheltered, isolated village like Haneda would accept a foreign woman as their leader. She wasn't just a woman in their eyes, she was almost like a god. Saiga is another character who has some pretty interesting deviations from his original counterparts. His role in the story is a blend of Shiro and Jun from the original, as I mentioned earlier. He owns the local hospital, but is also heavily involved in the ritual proceedings, and what's fascinating is how they blended these two roles together here. Unlike the original, Miyako was not the only sacrifice this time in Blood Curse. A so-called bridesmaid had to be murdered alongside her, and finding a suitable bridesmaid was Saiga's task. One of the nurses in the hospital, Yukie, seemed to have strong feelings for Saiga to the point of stalking him. In her journal, she writes about being the only person who, quote-unquote, understands him, and she ends up following him one evening to see what he was doing after work, taking pictures of him without his knowledge. Saiga realizes this and decided to capitalize on her infatuation. Knowing that she would easily bend to his will, Saiga tricked Yukie into joining the ritual, unaware that she was walking into her own death. Some fans speculate that, much like Shiro and Mina in Siren 1, Saiga and Yukie were already dating before the events of Blood Curse, but I don't personally buy into this. Her writing gives me the impression she's longing for him, lamenting the fact they're not already together, and she probably only said yes to the ritual in an effort to impress Saiga. She seems very eager for his validation, and I feel this is exactly what Saiga preyed on. Similarly, he seems very unaffected at seeing Yukie as a Shibito later on. If they were lovers, then wouldn't this be an upsetting sight for him, especially since it's his fault she's dead in the first place? Instead, she seems to be more of a nuisance to him than anything, so much so that you have to drive a stake into her to keep her off your back. Much like Shiro, Saiga strikes me as a psychopath who would manipulate those around him for his own benefit, and Yukie just happened to be the most convenient target. I know you could probably make an argument that they were an item, but unlike Siren 1, it's never explicitly stated that they were dating, so personally, the idea of Saiga manipulating Yukie feels much more fitting with his personality and actions. Especially when you realize that Yukie wasn't Saiga's only victim. We learn that residents of Haneda who spoke up against the Mana religion were forcibly admitted to Saiga's hospital and sent to the isolation ward, something that's hinted at by a villager in one of the audio archives. In his own notebook, Saiga has written instructions to the staff on how best to dispose of the isolation patient bodies, telling them to write off all deaths as cardiac arrest and to use whatever excuse is most convenient to ward off any families and friends. It appears that anyone who opposed the Mana religion was murdered at the hands of Saiga. Though, much like Shiro, Saiga also has a redemption arc, well, depending on whether or not you think he can be redeemed, by bringing the Urien to Howard. In his last moments, he calls out to Yukie, regretting what he's done. And again, much like Shiro, Saiga's death poses the question to the player, does his one good action absolve him of his past actions? At first, Saiga seemed the more likable and sympathetic of the two. Shiro's cold demeanour certainly did him no favours, but I think Saiga is a more subtly evil force in his respective story. Sure, he shows remorse for Yukie's murder, but what about the possible dozens of Haneda residents who also died at his hand? Neither character has many redeeming qualities, to be honest, but Shiro seems like the lesser of two evils, even if only by a margin. On a slightly lighter note though, can we show some appreciation for the archives in these games? Mixing real-life media with video games is something I really wish was more common. The blending of two different mediums can really help bring the characters and world to life, and the Siren series excels at this. Every single archive you've seen from the games are actually photos of real-life objects, be it a book, an ID card, ancient stone tablet, food, or whatever else. Toyama said they even went out to abandoned villages and buildings to get the right backdrop and lighting for some of the photos, which is an absolutely insane level of dedication. The video archives are always a treat though. My personal favourite is a snippet from Melissa's TV show Encounters, where she discusses a strange sighting caught on camera, but even she doesn't seem to have much faith in the story.
Wise.
Here we go again.
Our latest fieldwork points to some sort of extraordinary yet foreboding mystery. It feels as if something truly unimaginable is going to happen.
So, what do I think of Siren Blood Curse? It's a really solid experience and possibly the best entry point into the franchise from a gameplay accessibility perspective. Sightjacking is at its strongest and most modernized here, and the gameplay still offers plenty of challenge in figuring out different routes and avoiding Shibito. It feels like Siren 1 if Siren 1 wasn't so cruel and unforgiving, but you can always play on a higher difficulty if you really want to feel the challenge of the original. The story is presented in a way that is much easier to digest for a wider audience, the multiple subplots of the original have all been condensed, and the cutscenes are pretty fast-paced. Though, this is exactly why I would say that generally Blood Curse's story is less memorable. I'm definitely a fan of slow burn storytelling myself, and Siren 1 and 2 were games that had no shortage of that. Blood Curse, however, moves a little too quickly, I would argue. And because of this, you don't really get much time to get attached to characters, meaning some scenes and moments that were impactful in the original were less so in the reimagining. A really good example of this is when Saiga is revealed to be experimenting on Shibito, mirroring Shiro's scene in the original. Before, it was slow, haunting, and we see the fear in Kei's eyes when he realizes just how evil his brother really is. But in Blood Curse, we barely even see what Saiga's doing before he walks off and the cutscene is over. This tension from the original is completely lacking here, and it's definitely something I would call a downgrade. This is also why I think Siren 1's insanely high difficulty actually benefited its story in the long run. And look, hear me out on this. Take Tomoko as an example. You spend possibly hours on her stages, avoiding Shibito and hoping to bring her to safety, only for her to succumb to the curse by the time she finds her family. This hits hard because despite all of your efforts getting her there through some of the most challenging stealth segments imaginable, you still couldn't save her. You end up getting attached to the characters through your shared adversity with them. So when you go through a similar situation with Bella in Blood Curse, I found that attachment wasn't there as much, and I don't think it's because they're badly written or anything. No, I like the cast here quite a bit, but because that shared adversity isn't as present here this time around. Because Blood Curse is a much easier game, so Bella turning into a Shibito admittedly just didn't hit as hard. There's also something to be said about the switch to linear storytelling. Since a lot of the cutscenes and interactions are shown to you out of context in Siren 1 and 2, you were encouraged to figure things out for yourself, like the story itself was a puzzle. The linear storytelling in Blood Curse then does make things easier to follow, but it sacrifices that sense of mystery present in the original. Though I do need you to keep in mind, I'm not necessarily saying these changes are bad. You could think Blood Curse does it way better, and that is a very valid opinion. I'm not saying the changes made are objectively bad, I just admittedly prefer how the original did it. I can also fully admit that I'm heavily biased regarding this topic. I've always preferred the Japanese approach to horror over the Western approach. It took me years to play Dead Space because it just didn't appeal to me for the longest time. Alien Isolation didn't really do much for me either, and The Last of Us is probably the closest thing I have to a personal demon, though a lot of that is fueled by the fact a new Jak and Daxter game was shelved in favour of making The Last of Us. Naughty Dog, I have not forgotten about that. Same goes for movies too. Being a weeb growing up, I watched the Japanese original of The Ring years before the Western adaptation, so whenever you say The Ring to people and everyone just assumes you mean the American version, it kills me inside, dude, because I think the American remake sucks, man. The original is just so much more suspenseful. The fact you never see Sadako but you know what she's capable of is such an effective form of tension building. But the American version throws in a bunch of bullshit to fluff out the film because they felt slow burn wasn't enough, clearly. There was a horse jumping off a ship at some point or some... what's going on here, you know? Whereas in the original, that slow build-up really lends well to the final scene when Sadako crawls out of the TV. There's no fancy bells and whistles, just the sheer terror of seeing this entity slowly approach you, and there's nothing you can do to save yourself from a painful death. But of course that wasn't enough for the American version, was it? She has to teleport around the place first and the guy falls over and they made Samara really ugly, and it's just so overkill. There's just no subtlety here, man. But yet, while I clearly feel very strongly about the Western adaptation in The Ring's case, Siren is a little unique in this regard because both the original and its reimagining were created by the same people. Unlike The Ring, you can't argue that Blood Curse butchered the story really, because it's the original creators did both. And yet despite that, Blood Curse has a lot of haters, especially amongst the Siren fanbase itself. Again, all three of us. Hatred that feels pretty unwarranted. All they were trying to do with this game is adapt the original story into one that should, on paper, appeal more to Western audiences. This is especially apparent with the Japanese title for the game. In Japan, it's called Siren New Translation. You can see it here on my copy. They are translating Siren 1 into an experience that will be more palatable to those outside of Japan. Historically then, with horror, that means less focus on tension building and instead a lot more action and cool set pieces. But that being said, if it's an honest case of you just not personally liking the changes they made, that's more than fair. But they were only following in the footsteps of the Western adaptations that have come before it. You're getting annoyed at them butchering the original when it's like, yeah? Like, doesn't every Western adaptation butcher the original, from my experience? It just sounds like misdirected hatred at Blood Curse when really, you should be annoyed at the West for making such shitty adaptations. If anything, if you're one of the people who hates Blood Curse, you should be praising the devs for doing such a good job at making you hate it. I just really had to address that, you know, because even if I do personally prefer Siren 1 myself, Blood Curse was an exercise in taking the same story and changing it to better appeal to a new demographic, and seeing the differences between the two is fascinating. What did they cut down? What did they add in? How were the same scenes executed in each version? It's a very insightful study into what horror means to different audiences. If you've ever wanted to contrast Western horror against J-horror, play these two games and you will see that difference pretty quickly. Or, you know, on second thought, maybe just watch Siren 1 actually. I wouldn't really recommend many people put themselves through that. Though, would you believe that Siren Blood Curse was going to get an American film adaptation too, and none other than Sam Raimi himself was involved, working closely with Toyama on the project. But the plans must have fallen through, unfortunately, because I wasn't able to find any more details beyond the initial announcement. Bummer. And that is where our journey with Siren ends. Blood Curse did do well, its sales were decent, and critics were pretty positive about it, but that just didn't cut it for Sony. It's a crying shame, especially considering some outlets had really high praise for it. Eurogamer, for example, even said Siren Blood Curse is the best thing to appear in the genre in a very long time, but they wanted it to do really well. They were hoping that third time's the charm and Blood Curse would really put the Siren franchise on the map, but it didn't really seem to work out that way. Simply put, a lot of people just really don't like stealth games. Well, I would argue a lot of people don't have the patience for stealth games. And beyond that, you have to remember the market when Blood Curse released. The PS3 and Xbox 360 era was dominated by a lot of very action-heavy releases. In 2008, Silent Hill was in its Action Man era with Homecoming, and Resident Evil was going full steam ahead with its action horror style that 4 established years prior. People wanted exciting gameplay, people wanted explosions and epic shootouts. Survival horror, as we knew it, had to evolve. And Siren, a series that favoured stealth over guns, was one of the casualties during that transition. But you know, I can make peace with that personally. Not every game needs to be a series. Not every game can become a series. Siren was a franchise that was tied together by 3 core things, in my opinion. Sightjacking, stealth, and some random-ass god getting pissed off for some reason. And as cool as those things are, I think they'd get stale if they kept pumping out new Siren games. How many times can you do that premise over and over again, you know? And you might think, well, that's why they gotta evolve, that's why they gotta switch up the formula, and like, yeah, but then it's not really Siren anymore, is it? Toyama and the gang probably thought, alright, let's not ruin a good thing, let's call it a day with Siren and move on to other projects. And they did. Toyama and Japan Studio went on to make Gravity Rush to rave reviews, an action-adventure game that is a complete departure from horror. Sometimes it's okay for a series to die out. The 3 Siren games we did get were all really good, each offering a unique experience from the last. This is not something that can be said of a franchise like Silent Hill that had a good thing going, until it didn't. Now, while the franchise may end there, we're not done yet. You ain't getting rid of me that easily, alright? I want to take a moment to shine some light on fan efforts that have been keeping Siren alive the past decade, and on my travels, I discovered there have been a number of Siren fan projects out there in the years since. One that caught my eye in particular is called Lemuria. Taking inspiration from Siren's blending of real-world websites with the in-game archives, a very dedicated fan created a Siren-inspired story. It follows a group of occult enthusiasts who head out to a small village in Japan where they discover some creepy cult happenings. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? But first off, someone created entire hub worlds in VR chat that pay homage to the Siren games. But VR chat's scary, and I don't want to go on my own. If only there was another survival horror-centric YouTuber who's also done insanely long videos on the Siren franchise. Let's go, gamers! Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
Game on.
So, what do we actually do at this bit?
That's a great question. So, just for context, this is one of 3 worlds made by a Japanese user called Nakada Arariri, which is really hard to say quickly. Try saying that 5 times back to back. And this is the first one of the 3, based on the first game. If I were to take a wild guess, maybe we run into the Red Sea. Maybe we have to Umi Okudi ourselves.
Ooh. Oh, Oh, that's cool.
Maybe.
Okay.
I hope.
Oh, I'm in. Alright. Oh, this is so cool.
Hell
It's
yeah.
got like the text and everything.
Yeah, it's doing the
that's
whole
so
vibe.
cute.
I love that. Yeah. So here we go. This is one of the places. I'm blanking on the names, but I remember the it's like the shopping district, I think, right? That seems to be what it's going for.
Oh,
in Siren 1.
Is it?
Is it?
I'm gonna say it with a horrible English accent, but Arato.
Yeah, I think it is Arato, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna commit to the accent as well.
Sorry. I played the Siren games with the English dub, so you know how it is.
We'll
My
forgive you for your
pronunciations
sins.
Are like
Siren
once.
articles. Whoa. What could that be? We'll find out soon enough.
I can't even read it. I can read some of the symbols. But
Let's go! Japanese pro here, Eurothug-san. Eurothug-sensei.
My Japanese is so Jozu. Oh, look at this. Oh, is this like the trailer?
Oh, part of the
Siren
Japanese
2?
trailer. Ooh. Or is it just cutscene compilation or something? Okay. Oh, so is this Siren 2?
Oh,
or maybe
so
it's Siren
cool.
1. Maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe it's a bit of all of them. Who knows? No, it is Siren 1, yeah, because it's got the Dadatsushi freaking out up there.
I like the mana cross here.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, on the ground. Holy shit. Yeah, because that's a Siren 1 lore accurate, I think. It wasn't on the
Yeah.
ground or something when Dadatsushi, when Space Sushi Man got eaten.
Yeah. That he was on.
Yo! Are any of these buildings interactive, maybe? Let's see.
Oh, okay, I
Oh.
walked into the one with the...
Phased into the wall there. Whoa!
Yeah.
Okay.
Whoa, this is a lot of shit.
Yeah, okay, so this is the thing we're going to check out later, the interactive puzzle game made by fans of the game.
Oh, what is this?
Dadatsushi question mark? Yo, Dadatsushi got a fat ass, bro.
Yeah!
God damn!
What is this? It's right here. I don't know what all that says though.
A female creature. Female creature. It's like, is it meant to be like a female Dadatsushi? Oh, okay. If that's what they're going
Like-
for, that's kind of sick.
Did that work? I'm in this building. Hold on.
Oh!
Did that change? Wait, I can see behind myself. Oh my god.
Oh my
I'm
gosh,
like a
Shibito cat?
That's so good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Wow. This is awesome. Oh my god. Yo, the boys!
Oh my god.
These are
it's so
adorable.
cute.
I don't know if this is a
love
mascot
that.
from something, but I love it. What is
Oh,
that?
we can equip the hand noodles. I mean, it's not really doing anything. We're just walking around with like.
Here you
balls
go,
of,
babe. Here you go.
Just there you go. Yum, 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 yum. Oh, you can also equip the
the
that's
subject
cool.
things. Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Oh, that's bad. Oh, yeah, I gotta
Yo.
drop it. That's
This
so,
is so
cool. Wow, that's impressive. How did they do that? There might be more in the other worlds, though. Oh god, we're stuck. No, we're not.
Oh, maybe.
Are we stuck? The door. Oh, it's through here. Oh,
Try the door.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Try the door. Wow, the sass. Try the fucking door, you idiot.
Oh man. Oh.
Okay, that might be
Yeah,
it for
can't
this
seem
world.
to- Yeah. I think
This
that
is
might
definitely
be.
the simplest of the worlds for sure. It's kind of really just one
Okay.
room. But we'll hop over to the next one then. Yo, we on the boat.
Oh, this is cool.
That was cute. Okay.
Can we just click on this?
Oh.
Uh-oh. Oh my god. Oh shit! I didn't even realize. Didn't even see that.
That was spooky. Can I just run out to the sea? Is there anything to stop me from doing?
I can see you just running away. Oh man.
Is there no limits?
No,
Oh, there is a
come
limit.
back.
Okay, there is a limit. I'm Umi Gaiden.
Been blessed.
I've been shibitoed. Your ass has been shibitoed.
Oh, they do have a jump here.
I fell
gonna
again.
say.
Oh no! Oh my goodness! Oh my
Did you
goodness!
fall into
How
this bit?
did this happen? In all honesty. All right, reload it is. Reload it is. Respawn. There we go. I have to Umi Okuri myself once more.
You have to Umi reload.
Yo, what Siren lore is that? I don't remember Umi reload. Alright, we back gamers. Be careful in that corner because my god, you'll slip into
I'm not.
the abyss.
Oh, this is cool. It's like exactly the same.
I really need to stop laughing at the cat
yeah.
avatar. It just keeps getting me.
Oh, this is kind of weird how accurate it is.
It's it's definitely a step up already from the previous one. Oh! Oh, cool. Hey yo, movie night.
I didn't know they had a drive-in cinema.
Yo.
On, was it Yamijima Island?
Yamijima's got a drive-in? Damn, what are the Yamibito complaining about, man? They've got so much going on here.
Can we draw?
Oh!
Whoa! I did a 3D drawing.
We just keep
like
running and just do
ruining
light.
this
Oh hell yeah, that's awesome.
It's like something happening, but we're just here with like our pencils.
We're so easily entertained, my god. My goodness.
Oh no. Is it not? I was hoping someone's face would come up and they'd have
Oh, that would have been golden. You might have a chance yet.
Oh no,
damn
the
it.
face is too high up.
No.
It's okay.
That actually kind of lined up there.
Oh no!
Oh man.
I ruined it!
So, hey Mark, really loud.
Oh god.
It's a pleasure to talk with you today.
I think we should start by, can you...
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Can you introduce yourselves and your roles and how long you've been working up there for?
It's even funnier when you get up close and you just look at it from below. Because you just see everything stretched out.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Please call station for voice check.
I can't breathe. Oh, I'm just imagining if some Japanese person joins this world and all they see is the shit we drew everywhere.
We're adults, I
What
swear.
the fuck's playing on TV?
Oh, that video's golden. The Oblivion music is just 10 times better. That's Oblivion, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was everything.
That's GG. Okay, right. On to the next.
Oh hell yeah! Oh my god, is that
meant to be a...
Is that meant to be Curia? I'm confused.
What is this?
It is,
fit?
right?
Maybe
Oh,
Miyako,
maybe,
but I'm not
yeah.
quite sure. Damn, she got like angry ass eyebrows though. God damn.
Oh, that's oh, what's his face? The doctor. Oh my god.
K Makino.
Yeah. Oh no, K is the priest, right?
Oh
no.
yeah, my bad. Sorry. Yeah, the doctor was Shiro. Yeah.
Oh, Shiro, that was it.
Yes. Back to the fat ass Shibito. Let's go. Okay. Slay. Siren 2023. Huh? Question marks? Cool. Let's get into it.
Oh, there's like a
it's
thunderstorm. This is awesome. It's like the first level.
Yeah.
It's the nest. It's the nest.
Oh shit,
Look.
nest. Oh my god, wow.
Oh, that's so
this is
cool.
impressive. Wow, you could really see them just improving with every one. That's really kudos to the creators.
This looks so legit. What?
My god, this detail is crazy. Oh,
do you hear it?
Shibito noises. I hear we.
Oh, there's like the fighting sounds.
Yes. Oh, this is the
it's
ritual area, I guess.
Yeah. Was it the mirror pool or something? Oh, what's it called? I don't know.
Where
it's
Miyako gets like toasted.
Yeah, she gets like
her ass gets cooked.
Deep fried.
Oh, hang on, what all these buttons do? Yeah, open the.
I like
gates
how
now.
you can just DJ the ritual.
Yo, we got DJ Hisaku on the tunes tonight, boys. You're in for some good belters. Stand over here. Stand over here. I want to see what if this button does what I think it does. Oh my god!
Yeah, it sounds like it's right next to
Yeah.
you. Oh, I jumped up here. Look.
Oh, you did a little twirl. That was cool. How did you do that?
Oh, I did?
Yeah, I don't know why your model just
I
like did a
don't
cool
know.
twirl. That was cool as hell.
Oh, is this thingy's house? Tamon's house?
Oh god. Oh dear. This
What
does
that
not
say?
bode
Is
well.
that- oh.
Tamon.
Oh, it's them.
Oh. Otosan, Okasa, Mom, Dad.
Oh, they got deep fried. Oh no.
Oh, F's in the chat for the Takeuchi homies.
Damn. We can be Takeuchi.
Yo!
Tamon, whatever his name is.
Tamon, yeah. Oh my god, that's amazing. That's a good outfit. That's great.
Oh, that's great, actually.
Hell yeah. All we
they
have to
even
do is
have
kill
this,
our parents. When you're returning into this room, If I remember correctly in the cutscene, yeah, he when the ritual's happening, he jumps in and he's like, "We're too late," or something like that.
Oh, I see.
I think that they want you to roleplay.
Okay. No, Miyako! No!
No!
Oh my god.
Miyako-chan! Hold release to throw. Right mouse, hold.
It's not working. Oh.
Oh.
Well, at least we know how we can reheat our noodles.
That's so true. You're so right. Cook that shit.
Where's the
It's back here, actually, yeah. Mmm.
Ah, there
Fresh
you go.
ramen. Oishii desu ne.
Yummy, yummy. Watashi wa hungry desu.
Dinner is
it's
served.
ready.
Itadaki masu, homie. Tamon is a absolute fiend for ramen, I bet.
I mean, when your parents die, the first thing you want to do is eat, right?
Eat some din-dins, yeah, just, you know, you get over it. Just get over it, babe. Oh, man, oh, another hole. Oh, my. Oh my god, that's you!
Oh!
That's you! Oh my god, we're sight checking, baby! Is it? Oh, that's me! Did my ass look fat though?
Oh.
Shit!
Oh no, it's not working for me anymore, the screen.
No! Oh, it's probably when you run past it. Oh, that's kind of creepy though, Jesus.
It is me. I am the one watching.
Tamon.
Ignore the person behind me.
Ignore him. He's just my homie.
Don't worry about him.
Oh, he's gone. Oh, he's out of this bitch. He ran.
What's this?
Oh,
Ew!
no. What is that?
What is that?
Ew. Oh, my belly is getting in the way. I can't even see what it is. Oh my god. A K Makino fit? Are you kidding me?
Oh wait, yes, oh shit, this is cool. Yeah, because in what's it, the like little short stories that were written for Siren, one of them is Kei realizing that he is also cursed because he's taken in some of the Kajiro blood. So he turns into like a massive flesh and can't die. So that's what that is.
That's such a specific reference. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's why I was like, oh shit, wait, as soon as the Kei Makino avatar came up. That's really cool.
Yeah, because I was thinking, I know that Kei and Shiro's last meetup, I thought was in this area.
Oh, look, yeah, and here's Thingy's what's
fit.
it called? The
His
uniform,
doctor
yeah.
outfit. Yo! Oh,
Oh,
man.
that's cool. Hold on.
Oh, hang on, let me show some affection for my brother. What's lip do?
I was always jealous of your upbringing.
Yeah, they're both kind of like jelly of each other. I don't know why is his lip. I don't know what that did. I don't think it did anything.
Yeah, he's doing a little, he's biting his lip.
Wait, really?
Is there anywhere we can go here? Oh, no, that's just out of the map.
This is absolutely something he'd say to his brother. Boo.
Oh. Boo. Wait. Where is it?
That's you, bro.
Oh no. Ooh. Oh god. Oh.
Whoa, okay. Whoa.
Whoa.
What the hell is Kay
Whoa.
getting up to? Me oh my.
Oh no.
Ooh la la. Oh.
Oh wait, this is me. Oh no. I'm a massive flash.
I have no mouth and I'm a scream energy.
So sad. So sad.
Oh man. Oh, that was dramatic.
It's okay, guys. I'm just sleeping.
It's sleepy time.
Haha. JK.
I'm dead. Is this a door? Oh! Oh god, I have teleported.
You teleported?
Through the store here. Oh god, how did you end up
you...
blowing up this? That's like the thing you're not meant to blow up. I was gone for 5 seconds. Okay, Makino, what have you done?
POV, it's my first day of work and I've set the place on fire.
To be fair, wasn't it actually like Makino's whole arc was that he was super incompetent at being a priest?
Yeah, literally.
That's literally what I love him to bits, but yeah, he's a bit useless at everything.
He is, but it's great. He's like, Hisako, where are you? Help me!
I know,
help
and
me,
then one cutscene where he's like crying and he's like, oh, little bitch!
A goo goo gaga, mommy, please help me. Please help me.
Yo, speak of the devil! Is this one of his many fuck-ups, probably? Oh, there he is!
Oh, Yoriko!
This is simply peak fiction, I think.
It really is.
Can I? Is this one of those? Okay.
Oh my god, your face is like, when you look down, it kind of crumples up. Hold on, let me see if I can... Do you see what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah! Oh my god! Your face breaks!
It's really your nose.
That's haunting. Right. Okay.
Oh! Are you like crawling?
Was that crawling? Was that what I was doing? Dude, I'm sneaking. It is Siren, lest we forget.
It like stretches when you...
Oh, that's awful.
You look so suspicious. Ew!
After we'd had our fun in VR chat, we sat down and checked out the Lemuria project. The website is designed to look like a real official website for an occult magazine of the same name, and it looked really legit. It kind of fooled me for a second. It seems that the Lemuria publication has officially shut down due to the staff going missing while on a field trip, and this is where we come in. In essence, Lemuria is an interactive movie of sorts. They're short videos that push the main plot forward, all done in the style of found footage, and you have to read the accompanying archives to put together the story. For starters, massive kudos to all involved for how closely they replicated the aesthetic of Siren. It resembles the menus, the UI, and the general colour scheme so well, and the archives look like they jumped straight out of the games. There's even some nods to in-game archives as well, like this issue of Atlantis magazine here, or this book called Hill of Silence, obviously a reference to Toyama's previous work Silent Hill, the book being written by James Mason, translated by Masahiro Yamaoka, and published by a company called Konamisha. Yeah, that's a Silent Hill reference, I'd say, yeah. Some archives are locked behind a password, and you have to watch the videos and pay attention to the timer up in the corner. When it flashes yellow, that's your 4-digit code for the next archive. The videos themselves, yeah, you can tell it's a fan project, but I didn't even care. I thought it was really impressive seeing fans create something with so much love and attention to detail as a total homage to Siren. I wholeheartedly recommend checking it out for yourself, regardless of whether you can understand Japanese or not. If you're someone who loved the archive element to Siren, or you just want to see a cool little fan project, go for it. I'll drop the links in the description. Once again, all credit goes to the user Nakada Raridi for both the VR Worlds and Lemuria. They did some amazing work, and I'm really glad I could show it to you guys today. But I think it's time we get moving along now, so does our friend Eurothug4000 have any parting words for the audience?
I'm such a bad priest! Oh! I'm not good enough for this village. I must go now.
So true. You guys should check out her videos. She makes some amazing survival horror content. Goodbye, hit YouTuber Eurothug4000. Now, here is something that is going to bring back some memories. I am going to reach into the deep recesses of your mind with this one, okay? PlayStation Home. For anyone who has no clue what that is, PlayStation Home was a PlayStation-themed MMO, effectively, that you could only play on the PlayStation 3. It released for free in December 2008, and you could create an avatar, hang out with friends, decorate your little home space, go to themed areas all based on PlayStation games. It was pretty cool back in the day, and I'd say most people who owned a PS3 probably booted it up and ran around for a little bit at some point or another. I know I did anyway. God, I spent a lot of time on this thing. There was an explorable world for most of the heavy hitter releases on the console, and you know, it was a little bit janky, it was a little bit goofy, but a whole ass MMO coming free with your PlayStation, like geez, no wonder little Tango got hyped up, dude, can you blame me? But anyway, amongst those worlds was what was called the Siren Lounge, an entire area dedicated to promote Siren Blood Curse. Though unfortunately, I am about 8 years late to the party at the time of making this video, because when the PS4 came along and the PS3 was officially becoming old hardware, Sony decided to end support for PlayStation Home, and it officially closed down in March 2015. But that ain't stopping me, okay? Thanks to a group of dedicated fans, it is possible to play PlayStation Home in its entirety on your totally legitimate PlayStation 3 console, and with online functionality. Like, you can log in right now with a few friends and relive the glory days of awkward emotes and eerily quiet hub areas. So no more effing around, let's get right into it. First, let's sort out our avatar. I was just gonna try to make me in the game, but just as I started scrolling around the different menus looking for what to wear, I was hit with something that unlocked yet another memory deep in my brain. the PlayStation Move. Do you guys remember this? Dear God, Sony was trying to compete with the Wii by making a movement-based controller. Xbox did the same thing with the Kinect, and both were as successful as you can imagine. They never really caught on, and the only games that released using the technology were usually tacky shovelware family games, you know the type. But I am playing a now-dead PlayStation-themed MMO, and there was nothing more dead on arrival than the PlayStation Move, so y'all know I had to pick it. I left my apartment and headed into the main hub area, and it was so eerie seeing remnants of the past just lying around here. I feel like I've taken a step back in time to the early 2010s, you know? There's even a store here promoting the then up-and-coming PS4. Either way, looking through the dozens of hub worlds available, I decided it's time to move along and look for the elusive Siren Lounge and... A David Guetta world? I'll be coming back to you later. Anyway, here we are, the Siren Lounge, here it is. God, I think I came here at some point when I played this back in the day, because this is striking up some serious nostalgia. The text up on the billboard says, Do agaite mo zetsubo byoto, a play on the Japanese tagline for Siren 1, and it translates as something along the lines of, no matter how much you struggle, you will never escape the ward of despair. What I really liked about the areas and home is that they designed them to look like theme parks centered around the games, and in the Siren Lounge you can see Shibito cutouts like this one telling you have to be this tall to enter. Thankfully, my bulbous, multicolored head just about makes the cut. Whew! That was a close one. But let's not waste any more time, let's head right on into the Ward of Despair. So, the main attraction in the Siren Lounge is basically a survival horror minigame. With the backdrop of the hospital we saw in Siren Blood Curse, you have to avoid the Shibito nurses and make it to the end of the area within a 5-minute time limit. Back when PlayStation Home was still live, you could do this minigame in groups of up to 5 people, and I imagine because of that, not many people made it to the end. Because as soon as a nurse sees you, it's game over and you're kicked back out to the lobby. And of course, back in the day, you would have had to queue and wait your turn again just to get another shot at the minigame. A minigame you would have to coordinate via text chat with potentially 4 other people. 4 other people who could troll you and die on purpose, or just have lag because this was an MMO, remember? So yeah, safe to say it probably took people a long ass time to even beat this minigame once. But thankfully, there was not a soul to be seen on PlayStation Home on the Sunday afternoon I recorded this footage, and even more thankfully, I don't have friends, so I had the luxury of playing this minigame solo, allowing me to experience the Siren Lounge fully and at my own leisure. So let's give it a go. As soon as I loaded in, I saw Shibito Nurse just directly ahead, so I bopped into the nearby bathroom to take cover, until I realized that you can literally stand right in front of them and they don't notice you, which ultimately works in my favor, so I'm not complaining. After an admittedly underwhelming jump scare, I moved into the next room only to find the door locked. I decided to try a different route and tried shimmying past the nurse like an idiot, and in fairness, a large walking glowing dildo is hard to miss and I got caught. Anyway, on my next attempt I found the key and made it to the basement. Moving slowly past the nurse down here, and in hindsight I don't know why I was moving so slowly because I don't exactly have feet, I moved into the furnace room, knocking over some boxes on my way which made the screen suddenly flash red. Instantly, my first thought was a Shibito would be running my way, but nope, she was still standing right where I left her, so yeah, I no clue what that did at all. While figuring out what to do next, I somehow accidentally pulled up a list of preset messages and ended up telling the Shibito nurse I have no keyboard. No! I thought to myself, it is so over, but thankfully she didn't seem to care and I was able to live another day. I pulled the fire alarm, which made the nurse move out of the way so I could have a peek inside the operating room. I found nothing that exciting in here at all, really. Well, that is until the game asked me did I want a pair of trousers, which I took for some reason, not fully knowing how exactly they would aid me in my journey. I stealthed my way to the final hallway, only to find a Shibito nurse blocking my path. Find the signal flare, it said, but time was ticking and I had to make it quick. With a minute left on the clock, I desperately ran back through the rooms, mashing the X button in the hopes of finding the signal flare by sheer chance. And after calling down the elevator, there it was in all its glory. With 30 seconds to go, I ran back to the hallway, scared off the Shibito nurse, and there was the finish line. The game told me I won a prize for my efforts, but it was just a basic top with a Shibito head on it. I went to Haneda and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. Now, there are actually 3 different variations of the Ward of Despair. It's the same end goal, but basically the puzzles you have to do and the items you have to find are different in each version. I had to rely on the signal flare this time, for example, but another route has you use an egg timer to distract one of the Shibito while you make a dash for the finish line. Back in the day, of course, this not only offered an element of surprise and lots of replayability, but there were also different outfits to unlock in each of the 3 scenarios. Remember the trousers I picked up in my first run? Well, turns out there was also a pair of shoes and a white coat I could have found as well. And if you find all 3 items and manage to escape the Ward of Despair, you unlock that entire outfit, yours to keep. In the second scenario, you can unlock a nurse's outfit as well, but the last scenario is a little different. You have to finish it in under 3 minutes, and then you unlock Miyako's outfit from Siren Blood Curse. And I had a lot of fun learning the routes perfectly so I could unlock all of these outfits. A lot of effort went into this hub, and I think it shows. There's also a few little Easter eggs as well. On the 3rd and the 43rd minute of every hour, don't ask me why it's so specific, 1 or 2 Shibito walk around the outside area and then eventually walk off screen. But apparently only once a day, if you wait around in that same area, you can hear a gunshot and then a few minutes later, the siren itself goes off. And well, look, hey, I'm already in this deep, I may as well see it for myself, right? But the thing is, it happens at 6 AM in my time zone, so I've got a bit of time to kill. You know what's up, David Guetta world, here we come, baby! As soon as I stepped inside, I was sent right back to the year 2010. David Guetta posters all around, early 2000s radio dance music that I've heard enough of for one lifetime. There's even strippers, baby! Unfortunately though, David Guetta doesn't seem very popular in the PlayStation metaverse because there was not a soul to be seen, but it's their loss. There's even a DJ minigame where you can mix 2 songs together. I had no clue what I was doing, so I just kept moving this thing up and down, and somehow they ended up going out of sync and playing on full blast. I'm not gonna let you hear the auditory Frankenstein I created because it's copyrighted music and I'd really like to eat this month. But let's just say DJing is probably not a viable career for me. One door closes and another one opens, as they say. PlayStation Home says I was born to dance, and hey, I'm thinking that they might be onto something. After a long night of dancing and grabbing some fresh new David Guetta threads, it was almost 6 AM and time to move the party back over to the Siren Lounge to see if we can indeed hear the titular siren. And lo and behold, here it is. That was pretty cool. And with that, my time here on PlayStation Home comes to an end. I'm glad I could see this blast from the past in the flesh for myself again, because I was probably like 13 when I last played this. It was kinda nice going back and seeing what is arguably the last time Siren had any kind of presence on a PlayStation platform. We conquered the Ward of Despair, and we did it in style. Thank you, Siren, and thank you, David Guetta. Now, saying that this is the last time Siren had a presence isn't totally correct. I would say that Siren is mostly obscure over here in the West. The best I've seen since the Siren Lounge was the Shibito robot in the free Astro Playroom game on PS5, but that's about the extent of it. I generally found that Siren is most fondly remembered in Japan, and there's definitely a strong fan base for it over there. So to end things on a wholesome note, let's talk about how, despite not having any new games in well over a decade, Siren is very much still a well-remembered and well-loved series. For one, Siren has an official anniversary event that takes place in Tokyo every few years ever since the original game's release in 2003. In 2023, for the 20th anniversary, this event took place in the amusement park Namja Town. There were actors dressed up as Shibito roaming around, mana crosses scattered about, and entire sets replicating areas and rooms from the games. During the event, there was a restaurant serving food that replicated dishes from Siren, such as the infamous Hanyuda delicacy Hanyumen noodles, a hot ramen dish topped with strawberry jam and even seasonal fruits. An absurd mixture, but honestly, I would try it in a heartbeat if I was over there. There were also some novelty dishes like soup and cold drinks that were meant to look like the iconic Red Sea, and a hot dog where the sauce is meant to look like the red water tears of a Shibito. Who came up with this stuff? This is absolutely genius. Not to mention dozens of merchandise of all the characters like keychains, badges, clothes, you name it. Man, I think the 2019 event takes the cake though. For the 16th anniversary, there was a Siren exhibit in the Nakano area of Tokyo, and what better thing to base an entire exhibit on than all of the hundreds of archives throughout the series? Dude, they had every memorable item from the games you could imagine. We've got the Urien, the fictional Bang magazine with Naoko on the cover, Kyoya's missing person poster, even Yoriko's doodles of Tamon from her sketchbook. Siren 2 got plenty of love as well, with replicas of all the characters' outfits on display, as well as figures years of all the Yamibito. Don't even get me started on the merchandise. I could not be trusted going into a place like this. Holy shit, I'd be broke within half an hour. Now, it ain't much, but I did manage to get my hands on one thing that was on sale at this 2019 exhibit. It's a notebook with cover art in the style of archive number 80 from the first Siren, the Takeuchi Monographs Sacred Beliefs of Hanyuda, aka Tamon's dad's writings. It ain't much, but I'm glad I managed to nab some kind of keepsake, you know? Never gonna use it though. It's too precious to write in, are you kidding me? But, believe it or not, one of Siren's biggest fans is none other than Kyoya Suda himself. Kyoya, easily the most beloved character in the entire franchise, was played by the actor Mitsuyoshi Shinoda, who was only 22 when the game first released. And even all these years later, now in his early 40s, Mitsuyoshi still makes time to interact with the fanbase, even naming his own YouTube channel SDK, the username that Kyoya used while talking on occult forums. Even though Mitsuyoshi has gone on to act in plenty of other films and TV shows, he clearly holds Siren near and dear to his heart, and frequently cosplays as Kyoya when he goes to the official anniversary events. He occasionally streams on his channel as well, like here when he celebrated Kyoya's birthday.
いくぞ !3、2、1! Happy birthday, Kyoya! おめでとう Happy birthday! そして乾杯 !SDK の誕生日に乾杯
My favorite stream of his has to be when he was joined by Shiro and Kei's voice actor Nobuaki Mitsuda, both of them in full cosplay, playing through Siren 1 together.
ビーって言うた。うわ、ビー、うわ、一回マップだ。うわ、うわ、ちょっと、ちょっと、ちょっと待って、ちょっと待って。うわ、いいよ、うわ、うわ、いやいや、早っ。早っ。全然進まなそう感がすごい。どこや、来いや。あ、やめて。はい、来い。はい、かかってこいや。か、もう一丁、行くぞ。いや、やめて。おら。聞こえてんの。どいて。どいて。行かへん。怖い。怖い。ほら。これ二重になっちゃうな。やばい。マジ。やめて。やばい。殺される。やばい。殺される。戦うじゃ、距離感が違います。初日、朝5時3分、11。早っ。やめさん。みんなどこに。あれ宮尾さん、みんなどこにってやつ。
There was something weirdly validating about seeing even the voice actors struggling to play the game too. I'll drop Mitsuyoshi's channel link in the description. Even if you don't speak a lick of Japanese, it's well worth checking out his channel if you're a Siren fan. In 2023, alongside the Namja Town anniversary event, there was also what was called the Otherworld Expo on August 3rd. In Siren 1, at exactly midnight on this exact date, Hanyuda entered the Otherworld and red water began to flow through the village, kicking off the events of the story. To commemorate this, a bunch of the voice actors from the games got together to do a series of panels at the Otherworld Expo, reminiscing on their time working on Siren.
この時間軸で荒ぶれお願いします。さあ、10、9、あ、違う、違った。荒ぶれ！やったー！ 20周年帰りだー！帰りー！入ったでー！おめでとう！おめでとう！20周年！そして、せーの！
Not only that, but it's become a tradition within the fanbase to discuss the games, post fan art, and celebrate Siren's legacy online from August 3rd to August 6th, aka the 3-day period when Siren's story takes place, usually under the Twitter hashtag #IkaiIri, which means entering the otherworld. Probably my favorite thing from the hashtag every year has got to be what Japanese Siren fans call Miyata no Jaga Enjo Matsuri, which roughly translates as Miyata's Jaguar Fire Festival. Shiro Miyata was the doctor from Siren 1, and his first mission in the game involves going to his car, a Jaguar model of car specifically, to grab some supplies. Much later on in the game, when you're playing as Kyoya, you end up setting Miyata's car on fire to distract some nearby Shibito. Poking fun at the irony of the biggest asshole character in Siren 1 getting a dose of his own medicine, fans post fan art, cosplay, and memes under the hashtag to commemorate the burning of Miyata's very expensive car. Special shout out to the streamer Kokkun, who literally grilled some meat over the burning car. It doesn't get much better than that, man. I'll put the hashtags in the description for you to check it out for yourself. It's well worth seeing the timeline come alive with appreciation for a franchise that I would say goes largely uncelebrated in the West. And hey, if you're more artistically inclined, maybe consider sharing some of your own fan art too when August next rolls around. But rounding things out for the day, would I recommend the Siren games? Yes, absolutely. But which one depends on a few factors. Siren 1 is, in my opinion, the strongest game narratively and the most memorable of the bunch. But obviously the gameplay is insanely tedious and unforgiving. If you can settle with the idea of using a walkthrough though, I absolutely recommend giving it a whirl. It's haunting, it'll get under your skin, and it has such a fully realized world with an insane amount of lore to get lost in. While Fatal Frame is usually regarded as the GOAT of J-horror video games, to me, if you're willing to give it a chance, Siren 1 absolutely blows it out of the water. If that all sounds too much though, Siren Blood Curse is probably your next best bet. It's by far the most accessible gameplay-wise, and the sight-jacking system is at its most intuitive here. Though you obviously need to keep in mind that despite being a reimagining, it still deviates a lot from Siren 1. Not to mention, it's more of a Western take on horror, so it sacrifices some of the subtlety and slow burn present in the original. So in that sense, I wouldn't at all say it acts as a replacement, but rather it's the best way to play Siren 1 without actually playing Siren 1. Or, you know, Let's Plays exist as well. Siren 2, though, is the best of both worlds. Its story has the same complexity and depth as the first game, but it manages to actually be playable this time. It's less stealth-reliant, which is great if you want a bit more variety in your gameplay, and difficulty options means you can scale up or down the challenge as you see fit. In almost every sense, it is the optimal Siren experience, so if you're still not totally sure on where to start in the franchise, Siren 2 is a good place to test the waters. Maybe give the soundtracks a listen if you want a taster of what's to come. Remastered versions of all the Siren OSTs were added to Spotify not too long ago, where you can listen to tracks like Karuwari, Tenshi-sama, and of course, my favorite, Eien ni ikiru tte koto wa eien ni kurushimu koto to onaji da na. It's a classic, you guys know that one, right? And if you're more into reading, there's been quite a few Siren manga in the years since, either spin-offs or entire serializations. Each of the Siren Maniacs guides has their own one-shot manga, one of which was made by none other than horror god Junji Ito himself. Talk about a match made in heaven right there. There was also a one-shot that followed Tamon before the events of the game, and an 8-volume series called Siren Rebirth, which follows the first game's story but now set in the modern day. Well worth a read if you want a fresh spin on Siren 1. And I think that's it. I think that's all I've got to say about Siren. It only took me like, what, 3 hours to cover this series, and not gonna lie, there's a lot I cut out of the script to make this video at least somewhat succinct, and hey, maybe that'll make for a good follow-up video one day. There's just so much to love about Siren. It is still easily Toyama's magnum opus to me, and I really hope I at least did it some justice talking about it today. I do wonder if a Siren revival could ever be on the cards, you know, especially with the resurgence in horror the past few years. Maybe Siren would have better luck if it came out now. Survival horror is missing that gloomy, foreboding atmosphere that Siren introduced to us 20 years ago, but hey, even if it doesn't, like I said, I'm cool with it. A series revival gone wrong could end up staining Siren's legacy, and personally, I'd rather the 3 games we did get be remembered for the weird and wonderful flavor of horror they bring to the world. Because personally, I'm just glad Siren exists at all.
Sa 俺がお前